o'clock.
Hello, everybody. It's Wednesday. I almost said Happy Friday.
Yeah.
See, we've been doing this for a couple weeks now, and I'm still thinking that the episodes
This is week
are
2.
Friday. Yeah, I know.
Second week.
I'm so confused.
Yeah,
but
we changed the day.
Mango said, "Is it really episode 270?" I was thinking about that the other day because sometimes I forget like what number the episode is, and when I was doing my notes, I initially typed episode 170, and then I was like, no, it's actually 270. Holy crap!
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been doing this for
Doing a lot for a long time.
more than 5 years at this point. Yeah, because we started in like the summer of 2016.
Went by fast.
It really did. Like I said, it's crazy. Yeah. That's why sometimes like when people ask me if you've done a show on this or that, it's like I can't really remember right away.
And then they look at us like we're crazy. You don't remember? Been doing it a long time.
I've been doing it a long time. And it's like I can't remember like what all movies we've reviewed. I can't remember like what all topics we've talked about. You know.
We lose track. We lose track of the difference between what we actually did and what we talked about doing.
That's true too. And I think one of the problems too is that sometimes, like particularly with the true crime cases, like sometimes I've wrote about them for my book.
Yeah.
So I don't remember if I just wrote about them for my book or if we actually did a show about it.
Or we'll mention a case inside another case, but we didn't focus on the case that we mentioned.
Yeah, because I think that happens a lot with the disappearances shows because usually we do like 4 or 5 of those on like one show. So sometimes people will be like, oh, have you covered like this disappearance or that? And I'm like, wait, did we?
Yeah.
And sometimes too, like especially on those, I had notes for a lot more stuff and then we didn't get to it. So that happens too. So yeah, 270 episodes. And my brain is just Swiss cheese at this point. Yeah. Because I can't remember shit. But I know that we haven't done this topic. And I've been wanting to do this topic for a long time. So I was super jazzed that finally, because I kept putting it in the poll and it never won. And then finally it won, like definitively this time. And I was like, hooray, because I've been wanting to do this for a long time. Because I love this fucking... It's not a story. It really happened, but...
I made a good move today by accident. I went down to the to my bank, Bank of America. Was talking to just a random dude there who was like handling my account. I was asking him about my credit cards. I had to top shit off. I told him I was buying his house, and they're like, "Well, wait a minute, who are you going through?" And I told him who. He's like, "But I'm your banker." It's
like, oh, is he getting like jealous? And
yeah, getting jealous. So. He's like, okay, well, when you find out what they're offering, you come back and show it to me. Let's see if I can beat their deal. And he goes, I might be able to give you a more favorable loan. So we'll see. Got to get these banks fighting each other.
Yeah, fighting to give you money.
Yeah.
That's always good.
Yeah, he's like, sometimes what happens is if you don't go through your own bank or this and that, and you're going through something that your homeowner wants, they might be friends, and maybe they're like, would you just let me look at it? So he's like, and I was like going, yeah. He goes, because he doesn't care. He goes, no, he doesn't care. As long as he gets the money, he doesn't care who finances it. Let me look at it. I think I might be able to give you a more favorable deal in the rates. And I said, well, okay, all right, I'll do. Just don't say nothing. Just when you get it, bring it. Let me see.
Don't say nothing. You just did, though.
Yeah. I don't care. It's standard procedure. He owes fucking 20 properties. He doesn't care who when he gets that money, he's happy.
That's what I mean. It's like it wouldn't really matter like where the money came from.
No.
Tammy says I have to go back and rewatch episodes because I forget what they're all about sometimes. Yeah, same here, and we actually did them. Gramther's Hammer says, of the 270 episodes, which one are you the most proud of? Ooh, that's a hard question.
Oh shit.
The
Warrens.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the Satanic Panic show, both of the ones that we did, and that was shit. That was going back to like number 2. I don't know. I kind of feel like.
Oh man, the fucking dude that was the dude that was fucking all the corpses, and I lost it.
Oh yeah, that might be my favorite episode.
Guy here in Florida. That one I fucking lost it.
That was what we call it, the Loving the Dead episode. It was about necrophilia, where Tom just like quit the show in disgust at the end of it, and I was just like, I laughed and laughed.
I wasn't fucking joking either. I wasn't playing around. I just I can't take this shit.
I mean, of all the terrible shit that we've talked about on this show, that was too far over the line. And he's like, I'm out.
I started thinking about it, that he was having sex with that damn mummy. He even gave it a fucking fake pussy. Oh, man.
Now he's gonna like, don't get started this early because then you're just gonna like think about it the whole time. Because look, you're thinking about it. I can tell by the look on your face.
Old man fucking was in love with this little young girl.
What,
She
he made,
died.
like, a
He
fake-
dug her ass up, took her home.
He made like a fake pussy out of like a toilet paper tube.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a toilet paper tube, but it was like something like that.
He had her all papered mache and shit, so you could really, it was just like a fucking paper face. So he didn't even need her. He could have just made a paper mache dummy.
See, and I kind of feel like that's something that we covered on the show. I'm like, if that's what he was going to do,
crazy,
then why did he actually need the body? Couldn't he just have something of hers, like a lock of her hair or something not gross, that could like represent her body instead of actually having the body and then covering it with paper mache?
It was psychological.
I suppose. I honestly, that's gross as hell, but I kind of felt more sorry for that dude than anything because he didn't kill her.
No.
He was just a very, very sad, messed up individual. You know what I mean? He just like was in love with her and she died of natural causes, and he's like, well, I'm gonna go relieve. You know, I'm not saying it's good. He shouldn't have done that because it's still illegal, but at least he didn't kill her. So, you know. Mango said the first live stream is a classic. But yeah, Tom freaking out over Loving the Dead was so funny. I know, I still like laugh like thinking about it. One of these days I'll probably rewatch it and see it like because I was pissed. And the more grossed out he got, like the more entertained I became.
She kept fucking with me about it.
I know, because it was so fun. It was so fun that you were getting so disgusted, and I was just I was just trying to make it grosser and grosser.
No, I wasn't into it.
I'm not into it either, but it's just funny that you're getting grossed out by it. I'm grossed out by it too, but not to the point where I can't like read about it.
I was thinking about it, and I just was like,
Sabrina said the necrophilia episode was the first one I watched of you guys. Yeah. What an introduction.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
It's probably our best one.
Yeah. I mean, we've done a lot of good ones. I mean, there's some that that I kind of feel like, man, I wish I had covered it like better or something like that, but I don't know. I've kind of learned to let a lot of that shit
Warrens,
go.
the one about the Warrens, that was a good one.
Yeah, we did 2 of those, didn't we? Because I think we did a Warrens one, and we did like a Warrens revisited where we covered some cases that we hadn't covered in the first one. I feel like the Warrens one still easily like our top viewed episode, and also the one that I get the most hate mail about. But not so much anymore because it's old now. But but I still to this day, like, it's weird because you'd think the true crime ones that you would get more abusive comments, but the very few abusive comments are almost always on the paranormal episodes.
And the Warren ones, it's always religious fundamentalists.
Yeah.
Always.
But it's weird because I guess people that are like really, really invested in ghost stories, like haunted houses and stuff like that,
they really like.
They get really, really offended when people like say that maybe it's not ghosts.
Yeah.
And even more than like they get more offended than like anybody. I'm really not sure why.
Yeah, and the Warrens were hacks. They were on some real cases.
Yeah.
But they were bullshitting most of the time.
Yeah. Matthias tells a joke. Why did Dr. Frankenstein hire Igor as his assistant? Because he had a hunch about him. But yeah. So look, it's like I even have my Bride of Frankenstein shirt on.
Look at this shit.
What is she doing?
Tearing up more books.
Oh, she just likes to tear up books. You guys are not paying attention to me.
Yeah,
and also, she had to she was laying in this chair because I was sitting in here working, and she was like just laying there for hours, and so Tom had to like dump her out the chair, and she's like still mad.
Yeah, she's mad about that.
Even though we gave her another exact same chair like right here that she could sit in, and we put her in it, she was like, "Fuck that."
Yeah.
You chucked me out of my chair.
She doesn't understand what the show is. The show is just when the people talk to the lights.
Yeah, and she's like,
lights right here, and we're talking to these lights, and that's beyond.
And you guys are not talking to me, and you guys are not petting me. She's like, so I'm just gonna go around in the background and like scratch everything up. Don't throw a pillow. Oh my god!
Look, she's tearing shit up. She's serious. She wants me to go back there and stop her.
She's so funny. She figured out like today in the dressing room, because remember I said she figured out how to like open that lower cabinet, and she was playing on it, like scratching on it, and then like I turned around and she was gone, and I was like, I wonder if she's still in there. So like I opened it and she had like gone back in the cabinet, was like laying back in there, and she was in there for like a really long time, like in the dark. I don't know what she's doing in there. She's so weird. She's so weird.
She challenged me to come get her. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you know.
She's laying down now. She'll be cool.
Good girl. Well, for 5 minutes until she forgets.
Right.
But yeah, so let's see. Do we have any like particular shout outs or anything that we needed to talk about in particular before we kind of get into this? And well, yeah, I was saying like I have my Frankenstein poster back there too, which you know, this is, I don't even remember like the first time, because I mean, I read Frankenstein in school, I think, as probably most people did. And I didn't know, I think when I first read the book, I didn't know like the fascinating story behind it. Well, and I should say too that, and I kind of want to get into this a little bit, is that the incidents that led to the writing of Frankenstein may have also sort of maybe indirectly led to later an inspiration for Dracula as well, which I found like really interesting. I think what I find really interesting about this historical incident or series of incidents, if you want to call it that, is that on paper, I guess it seems like all of this like weird unrelated stuff, but it was almost kind of like one of those weird things where like the universe kind of all comes together and like all these varying things happen at one time, and then like the cultural results of it are just like long ranging, even though I'm sure they probably didn't, obviously they didn't know that at the time.
This scene here was the beginning of the goth scene.
Yeah, probably it was.
Yeah.
Well, goth is very rooted in romanticism.
Yeah, and then the horror that they were writing. So this is the very beginning of the gothic horror, and when you hear about Mary Shelley and fucking read about some of the shit that she said and the weird shit she was kind of into and her husband and stuff that went down, it sounds like goth kids. And they were young. They were young.
Yeah, it really does sound like... It sounds very modern.
Yeah, they were rich kids. They'd lay around, get high, and fucking swap wives. They're teenagers, you know what I mean? They're just like free love.
Or like in their 20s, yeah.
Yeah, teenager 20s. And swap wives and get high and smoke opium and shit in their parents' house and big old mansions. And Mary Shelley wondering what it would be like to screw her dad. That kind of weird shit.
Yeah, I was.
She was real weird, yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I'd call her weird. I mean, she was, well, I guess she was pretty weird for the time.
Yeah.
And as were all of them. I mean, they were all considered, and here I'm talking about Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, stuff like that. So they were kind of like, they were elites in a sense, but the ideas that they had were very, very radical for the time.
Yeah, they were nonconformists.
Big time.
Yeah.
And a lot of society and stuff like kind of ostracized them for those very reasons.
Although they were kind of coming out of the 1700s, and a lot of people are not aware of the fact that the late 1700s was a sexual revolution.
Yeah, there have been many.
Was going on there.
There have been many.
There was nudism, free love, just living with like common law. Like they're like Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin had a couple wives, and I don't think he was married to any of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, just they were like common law wives, and he was a nudist, and would give weird advice to young dudes. It was sound advice, really. He said, you know, these older women are quite appreciative. Yeah, he'd say shit like that. You know, if you're a young man and handsome, then maybe you need to give attention to these older women. Go look at the widows. You know,
go after some of the cougars.
Yeah, they are very appreciative to young men. You know, you just had to read between the lines. You know what he's talking about. He was cool though. He was very cool.
He seemed like a cool dude. Yeah,
hanging out in the French courting all those fucking French girls and shit. Fucking that was how politics was done in France at that time. Politics wasn't business. Politics was fucking social activity. So it was a scene. So you had to be fucking high up in the social scene. And he'd walk around with a damn fucking raccoon hat on.
Yeah, his coonskin cap.
Yeah, acting like a damn simpleton and giving out these, wisdom from the woods to impress French people. When he was a city dweller, he was just pretending to be a redneck. He was. He said so.
Thank you, Zach.
Yeah, he only wore a coonskin hat when he was in France.
Funny you're talking about the year without a summer today, says Zach. Since there was a pretty big eruption from a Japanese volcano a few hours ago, actually. Wow, that's like a total coincidence.
Yeah.
A coincidence, that's what that is.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to talk about that, Year Without a Summer, all that kind of stuff, which was a Rasputina song too, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
1816, The Year Without a Summer. And it was about this. And obviously, even though a really bunch of bad shit happened, it was like a global disaster, essentially.
Yeah.
But
I just think I think it's funny how they do seem to be very modern, but I think that's only just because we were raised by boomer parents who were coming out of the 50s and the 60s, and that particular time was fucking stuffy. Really, it's just kind of returning to normal. That's
yeah, because you could almost say, like I said, Mary Shelley and that circle, the people she hung out with, and her parents too, even, were actually very radical for the time, but very into like political reform. They were anti-authoritarian, anti-theology. They just were really they were atheists, which was, like I said, they were respected within kind of intellectual circles, but society at large kind of looked down on them a little bit.
Well, the working class and the people have always liked religions, and speak out against religion too much and they'll fucking come down on you. Now, it's not as bad as it was, but it's cyclical.
Yeah.
Cyclical.
Yeah.
And they just they were living in a times that was the early 1800s, late 1700s. Like I said, was a time of sexual revolution. It was probably kind of closer to the 60s, really.
Yeah, and several people have made that comparison. And like I said, I don't think it was all that widespread, or at least it wasn't seen as wise. Like, if you were doing it, everyone would kind of be like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? But,
well, there was no mass media.
Yeah.
So cultural movements didn't usually spread far and wide. Well, maybe only through 3 or 4 cities across a couple different countries. And then maybe like certain segments of those cities. The people that were writing about it. That's how people would know. It wasn't mainstream.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. That's kind of what I was gonna. Yeah. That's why I was saying, like, it was sort of like a certain segment of elite circles, intellectuals. It was kind of widespread there, but in society as a whole, it was still kind of like frowned upon.
This is pre-industrial revolution. The mainstream were tilling soil and raising fucking cows and working on farms. They had no time to get involved in any damn underground scenes, reading books and writing and swapping and shit. They didn't have time for that.
Writing and swapping.
Yeah, here, you fuck my wife, I'm gonna take yours.
There probably was some swapping going on, but they probably kept it on the down low.
It was that barnyard swap. It was that barnyard swap.
He's cheating on one cow with the other cow?
Well, no. I'm just saying that they're all in the barnyard drinking fucking moonshine. Well, I think it's pre-distillation. Drinking, and fucking one thing happens and another thing happens. And next thing you know, it's just a bunch of farm people fucking. That's been going on forever.
Farm fresh fucking.
Yeah. It was like Wild Sex in the Working Class from Oingo Boingo. Like that. The name is like that song.
Please tell me that there's kind of like a redneck porn called Farm Fresh fucking.
I don't know. Gotta be.
I mean,
there gotta be a whole. Well, there's like a cowgirl fetish and shit like that, and there's some. Yeah, they got shit like that.
Well, like I said, anything you can imagine, there's porn of it.
Yeah.
That's Rule 34, right?
Gay cowboy fetish and shit. They got that.
Yeah, that's been around forever.
Yeah, forever.
Farm Fresh fucking. Now I want to see that movie. Actually, no, I don't. But I just like that title.
I mean, fucking Sid Vicious went to fucking Texas and did a live show with 2 fucking illustrations of gay cowboys on his T-shirt in Texas.
Yeah.
To gay cowboys, they tried to beat his ass.
Yeah, the Texans didn't cotton to that nonsense.
They did not like that.
But he did it on purpose. Like I said, the whole point of punk was like provocation.
Make people mad, yeah.
Yeah, you're supposed to like make people mad. They were the original trolls.
Yeah,
trolls. Well, not the original trolls. There have been trolls since time immemorial, but that's kind of that was their whole thing. But yeah, so what?
Time of the American Revolution and shit, and the fucking when they were fighting the British Empire, it was like something out of Star Wars. But that was like the 1960s. Go back and read American Revolutionary history of what was going on in the fucking main towns, in those colonies when they were fighting. It sounds like it's happening today. Trolling leaders in public. Fucking beating people up, tar and feathering people. Going to their houses and protesting and burning the house down. Fucking everybody calling everybody else a traitor. If you were not a loyalist, you were a traitor. If you were a loyalist, you were a traitor. And then there was sex going on in the New England colonies. A lot of it was like, out of wedlock, interracial stuff, fucking with these Indian girls, black guys with white women. It's all recorded. It's all there. Matter of fact, the first dude killed in the American Revolution was a mixed guy who got He basically got hit, but kind of by a stray round that the British fired off. I think it was supposed to be a warning shot, but it hit him and killed him, and that's really what started the. I forgot what his name was.
That was a hell of a warning, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, the British troops were pretty rattled, and I think some of them ended up later on. British troops were being accused of murder, but then you had American revolutionary guys who were honorable enough to defend them in court and get some of them off. Because it wasn't on them; they were being ordered to do things.
Yeah.
You know, no, they did time in jail, but they didn't hang them. You know, but interesting time. But if you read what was going on there, you can say that, well, damn, that's like the '60s, or that's like right now. It can fit.
Yeah.
So, and you can also say that for certain aspects of Roman history. Mankind is pretty much the same. Really, over time in the West, the East not so much, but the East is still the East, like China and Japan and Korea's. You know what I mean? They've changed a bit, but not totally. Well, it's the same with us. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, everything's just cycles of
the same kind of
revolutions, and then so everything just kind of So it's kind of like why I don't get overly upset about things, because
it's all pretty much been done before.
It's all been done before. Everything's been done before. And and the fact that we're talking about the American Revolution, that's actually kind of germane to this topic too, because the background that Mary Shelley grew up in was very much based in Enlightenment, reform, and all this idea of like radical, trying to get rid of the monarchy, trying to get rid of, the church out of political life.
Yeah, separation of church and state.
That was that was very much in the zeitgeist at that time. Yeah. So it all kind of like went together. So it was a very revolutionary time period. Well, the French Revolution, all that kind of stuff was going on.
Now, some people go, well, wait a minute, when the United States was a Christian country and this and that, you have to kind of read between the lines. Thomas Jefferson, who had a lot to do with the Constitution, had his version of the Bible, where he cut a lot of the bullshit out of the New Testament. He cut a lot of the bullshit out and left in what he thought was supposed to, what it really
He took
happened.
Out like all the supernatural shit, pretty much.
He tried to make... So, it was a secular society. It was not a Jesus-based society.
Not at all.
Because you'd have had constant fighting. Because in that time, the Christian sects were at constant war with each other, between Catholics and Protestants, and then different kinds of Lutherans and weird things that they had, and Quakers, and America was a lot different than Europe. America was a collection of Christian cults, most of them not really getting along with each other. You didn't want them to have true power. They had that, and that's why you ended up with the Salem witch trials.
Yeah, see, that's not what anyone wants.
And they were saying, basically, it says you got a moral people, and religiosity can provide a certain amount of moralism. A moral people is what you need for a republic, because it's about being fair and balancing everything out. But then you have a constitution and a Supreme Court to decide things, and you want to try to keep religion out of it as much as possible. And in a way, they were also saying you have to try to keep politics out of it. It was supposed to be just a bunch of... You'd be like, what do you mean politics? Well, they almost wanted to ban political parties. But they said, well, probably nothing you could do. Even if there was no political parties, political gangs would form, and they would just be political parties. Just they wouldn't have names.
Yeah.
So we ended up with what we have. It was an experiment. And it slowly became an empire. I think it'll go back to the way it was, though. Empires are, if you look at history, they're not sustainable. Because they're too diverse. You just can't have something that big. Too many people. Can't get that many people to agree.
That's true.
So they're coming out of a time that very similar to what's going on now. Why we're talking about it. The American Revolutionary period.
Yeah.
Kind of like now, kind of like the 60s.
Yeah, and like I said, it's very cyclical. Stop Prop says it was a great TV movie called Frankenstein: The True Story, and it was pretty close to Mary Shelley's story, maybe from the 80s. I think I remember what you're talking about, actually. And then Camp Guy said, I remember a TV miniseries where the monster ended up on an icebound ship. Well, isn't that the way the novel ends, though? Like, he goes up to the Arctic or whatever?
I haven't read it since
And then Frankenstein, like Dr. Frankenstein, like follows the monster up there.
I remember reading it back in high school and was kind of disappointed with it because it just was so long.
This book is so long.
And it wasn't like the movie.
Yeah, the movie is really not hardly anything like the book.
No.
Well, the book is very like philosophical, but like I said, that's because Mary Shelley's parents were both philosophers, and she had grown up being around like intellectuals, writers, other philosophers. I mean, the household at the time, she had just grown up surrounded by these ideas. So that was something that was very much like in the culture at the time, or in the culture that she grew up in. And it's interesting too that this always blew my mind that Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein when she was 19 years old, which is crazy. She had written, I mean, she like wrote little stories and stuff when she was a kid, but she'd never really written anything, you know, super serious or anything like that. And she really didn't feel like all that adequate about it. But the fact that she was at this gathering with two other big literary giants of the time, and hers is really the only thing that endured this long. And think about the cultural impact that Frankenstein has had, written by a 19-year-old girl who had never really written anything before, is just like crazy to me. And I think too that, I don't know, her upbringing to me seemed to inform a lot, particularly Frankenstein. I mean, she wrote shitloads of stuff like later on, which I kind of want to get into that at the end, because I don't really think that up until quite recently, no one really gave that much of a shit about any of the other shit that she wrote after, because Frankenstein. But she actually wrote a fuck ton of like novels and plays and all this other kind of stuff. And they're actually, and I guess like in the last decade or so, they've been getting like a critical reappraisal, and people are like, oh my God, like why, you know, why is Frankenstein the only thing that's like known from her? Because she did write like a shit ton of other stuff later.
Her writing that at 19 doesn't surprise me at all, because when you look at a lot of some of the greatest arts produced by really young people, some of the best heavy metal around that 18.
That's
19,
true,
20,
I guess.
Some of the best operas and shit for fucking, you know, fucking Wolfgang Mozart, Amadeus Mozart writing stuff around that age. It's just fucking mind blowing.
Although he was kind of like a child prodigy.
Yeah.
I mean,
but kids from this class in that time were children prodigies, a lot of them, because they were tutored at home by expensive tutors, usually from an early age. And they were married a lot of times by the time they were 14 or 15. 19 wasn't that young in the 1800s, 1700s.
And Mary Shelley, I mean, she got, because of her parents' beliefs, she actually got, she didn't have a lot of formal education, but she did have a lot. I mean, her father in particular was adamant that, because I mean, at this point, this was still a time period where women, they considered like education, they really didn't consider education all that important for women, because they were just going to get married off and be wives. So the fact that she was, that she had all these tutors, that she was around all these intellectuals at the time, and her father considered her an equal with men, which was unusual at the time. I think that also like really informed her later writing as well.
Education back then didn't really mean anything anyway. I mean, one man could go to a university in his lifetime, in a short period of time, really, maybe 8 years, 10 years, could basically learn the sum of all human knowledge.
Because there wasn't much.
There wasn't much there.
Get on a Post-it note. Okay, I got
you
it.
could, and a lot of what they were learning wasn't that practical. You couldn't do anything with it. And penmanship, okay, but and you know, there was some stuff that, you know, they had, you know, fucking. But the very basics of fucking, you know, mathematics and fucking, you know, calculus and trigonometry, they knew all. But what could you do with that back then? There wasn't even the Industrial Revolution hadn't started, so you couldn't really apply it too much.
Yeah, and I mean, unless you were going into the sciences, and even the sciences were very rudimentary at that point, like to say the least.
Yeah, science was about figuring shit out. This my laboratory. I'm gonna start shocking these animals.
Yeah,
see what happens.
And that's
what they were doing.
That actually plays a lot into Mary Shelley's upbringing. Not her particular upbringing, but you know, why she got the idea.
What would happen if I took the blood out of a cat and put a dog's blood in it? You know, they did shit like that. You know?
I'm gonna sew this.
Yeah, the cat died. I wonder why.
Well, like I said, this was kind of during the Enlightenment era, where they were just kind of like, you know, let's do all these experiments and figure that out. Which to us, that seems, it's like duh, but that was kind of like a big deal. Well,
they knew about the scientific method. You had to prove things and why, and you had to, you know.
And you had to do experiments over and over with different factors changed, like to figure out what was going to happen. What happens if I do this, and what happens if I do that?
Why did that happen? You know,
which, you know, I think people had been doing that without really realizing it for thousands of years. But, I mean, I kind of feel like during the Enlightenment most of the time and all that was kind of like codified into an actual method that everybody was, you know, a step A, step B, step C type thing.
In the 1700s, at least, and I'm assuming the 1800s is the same way because it was pre-industrial revolution. In the 1700s, the sciences, that was a rich man's sport. It was just a hobby. Every scientist was a rich dude that could afford to buy shit and could afford to, like, do experiments.
Well, they could afford the leisure time.
Yeah, it was all leisure time.
To set up their own laboratory and, like...
And they lost money. They didn't make money. There was no industries to sell any of that shit to. Now, there were some exceptions. You know, if you were close to the king and you were a good mechanical engineer, you might be able to come up with a new set of sights for a fucking cannon and maybe show and demonstrate that, oh, yeah, we can now use mechanical sights on a cannon. But half the time when you saw what they were buying, it was, like, fucked up. It still didn't work, you know. Kind of more like a con job. Like, well, why didn't we put a gear here? Why isn't it ratchet on both sides? Why can't you do this? It was always kind of like half-ass. But it might be pretty, though.
It's like the same shit they sell in infomercials.
Yeah, it might be real pretty, though, and highly decorated, but it just didn't really deliver as promised. Because it was just the concept of one dude who was rich, who kind of thought about it. You know?
I kind of thought.
Yeah.
Maybe this will work. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Hugo says, I think Mary Shelley's parents were also writers. Yes, they were. They were both philosophers and writers as well, which we will get into in a moment. Before we do that, I think I've shown this on the show before, but this is how much I just love this historical incident, this story or whatever. I did a board game. It's a board game sort of thing. Like I said, I think I've shown this before, but see, this is it here. I made this a while back, like last year or something like that. And basically what you do is you play as one of the characters. You can play as Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley, Lord Byron, Clara Claremont, and John Polidori. And basically you're trying to get these cards and kind of like complete the works that they wrote during this particular summer, which, like I said, although Frankenstein is the best remembered, there were some other things that happened during that thing that maybe led to some other shit later on. So, you know, I kind of find that really fascinating.
Mike says there will always be a separation between science and religions, and I will tell you, you are absolutely wrong. Absolutely. No. Throughout the past, most science was based in religion. That's why it fucking didn't work.
Well, I think that's what he meant.
Okay.
I think that's what he meant.
Yeah, but then there's a lot of shit.
Because it's two opposite ways of looking at the world, really.
Yeah, but I can show you fucking things that are supposedly science, and you fucking, when you think about it, no, it's religion. Yeah, no. Like, for instance, on the AR-15, the forward bolt assist. What the fuck is that doing there? Well, just to make you feel better. It doesn't make that fucking rifle fire any better or any reliable. Matter of fact, it's a mistake. If you try to chamber a fucking round in there and you start beating on a forward assist, you're going to make that motherfucker malfunction. You're not going to fucking remedy a malfunction. So no, there's lots of fucking superstitions and backwards thinking and fucking religion involved in fucking even weapons sciences. But it's there because it had to be there to make the army feel better about buying it.
But see, at that point, like I said, when you're saying that, well, that's not science anymore because there's not a scientific reason for it being.
Yeah, but the thing is that you can go through most of the things that are out there in existence that governments are buying, and there's always some kind of fucking hokiness in that thing, and it had to be hokey in order for them to buy it because the leaders that are running those systems are fucked up. They're going by emotion, not by what's real. And that's a fucking universal constant, you know.
Well, that's kind of how most people operate. But like I said, that's why I think it's important to learn scientific method, critical thinking, stuff like that, so you know how to like short circuit that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the problem is that method falls into the hands of people with 80 or 90 IQs, and they just can't apply that. They're dumb. What was it?
I don't know. I heard some kid screaming outside.
A kid or a fucking...
Scared the crap out of me.
Right. So the higher your IQ, the better, the easier it will be for you to follow a scientific method. But when that happens, you'll piss a lot of people off. because you'll be very dispassionate and you'll start saying things like, you know what? Why do we have old people? They don't make enough money. They're not really here for anything. You just do all kinds of weird shit. Why do ugly people exist? You know? And you say, well, that's crazy. No, there were a lot of both the Soviets and the Nazis were like that, trying to develop the fucking Soviet Superman and things like that. You look like a damn statues, you know, and eugenics and selective breeding. No, they tried all that shit. Now, is that science? Nah, not really. It's religion.
Well, because they had
it's a faith.
Well, yeah, because they had a preconceived
notion of what
notion in mind.
Right.
And they were just kind of like, so like I said, that's why science and religion, just using those two terms very loosely, are looking at the world in two different ways. Religion, you have an established thing at the, like, you know, for example, God exists. And so you're just kind of like sort of formulating everything to get to that.
Okay. I see where you're coming from now.
Yeah.
We're just disagreeing over what a religion is. Because I'm also taking into account for all the philosophies that don't even believe in religion, like Buddhism. Buddhism is a religion, but it doesn't have a concept of a God.
I'm talking about, when I say religion, I said that's a very loose term.
Right.
I'm just talking about any kind of like magical thinking. Any magical thinking which can be applied to anything.
Yeah, well, that's
superstition, anything.
Well, we start opening that up, that's 90% of human history. And everything that exists right now, it's just fucked up.
Well, that's why I'm saying that, you know,
Scientology,
the scientific method, you know, even though people had been doing it without really realizing it, like, for example, the first thing I think of, animal husbandry. You know, they had figured out evolution, natural selection, before that was ever codified. Like, before Darwin had come up with the mechanism. You know, they figured it out because they're like, oh, well, if you breed these two together, then it'll have a baby that has these characteristics. So they were doing that beforehand, even though they didn't know what the mechanism for it was. So people do have a sort of natural proclivity to that, at least if they're observing nature or whatever it is that happens. You know, they do understand cause and effect in a certain fashion. But we also have things in our brains that can circumvent that by giving you, like, essentially false positives. It's like, oh, well, you know, this happened after that happened, therefore the first thing must have caused the second thing, which is not always the case.
Right, and, you know, and of course, we're human beings. We have limited intellect. Even a genius is like 170 IQ. From the point of view of, like, a fucking extraterrestrial that is millions and millions of years ahead of us in evolution, they would just see us as a chimpanzee or a squirrel, you know, an unintelligent creature. So you're only going to be able to just do so well, you know. Like, you have these human geniuses trying to engineer things where we're going to make a utopian society. An alien would come and look and just see us as a fucking bunch of fruit flies in a jar. And they would go, oh, you can't do anything with that. And they would just kill us.
The dumbasses are always going to hold us back.
Yeah.
They're always holding us.
Let's start over. You know, it'd be like that. So.
And then they blow up the earth.
No, they would just sterilize it, and then fucking hopefully the fucking nature would reboot and something better would come about. Or we have a certain amount of fucking, what do you call it? We think a lot of ourselves, but it's just because we're humans and we're seeing things from our point of views. All creatures do that, no matter how primitive they are, I would think. Solipsism, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard not to be like that.
Yeah.
You really have to make a conscious effort.
Right. And well, true science is like that. True science would be like, yes, you're a human. Yeah, whatever. You know.
Yeah, it's like
machine intelligence is better. Go ahead and make really intelligent machines, and you guys all need to kill yourself to make room for true intelligence. And would people do that today? Fuck no, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do that. Yeah.
Danny Rolling Ghostface says, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was the first book I ever read start to finish, and the cover art is what got me to want to read the book. Yeah, just saying. Yeah, it's kind of like one of those books, because it's crazy that, like, Frankenstein is so fucking, like, the story is so ubiquitous around the world, really, that I kind of feel like most people have seen some movie or TV iteration of it, and then when they read the book, like in high school or wherever, I can't remember if I read it in junior high or high school. When it was assigned, but they're always kind of like disappointed because it's just kind of like, well, it's nothing like the movies, which it's not. But I mean, the story's kind of the same. But you know, it's one of those things. I kind of feel like people have the same thing with Dracula a little bit, because the Dracula, the movie that they made of Dracula, like under like the Bela Lugosi one and stuff like that, were actually based on the stage play, which was a very simplified version of the novel. So the novel is really not that much of anything like the movies. I mean, it's essentially the same story, but there's a lot of other shit going on.
Serpent Surfer says he hopes that extraterrestrials are out there, or those coke snorting aliens out of the movie Heavy Metal. What would they call that? Zork? Was it Zork?
It was something like that. Sounds like that's.
Yeah, it came in a damn fucking like a lawnmower that would dispense it, and they sit there fucking snorting it off the ship's deck. They had the hottie that they picked up. The robot got laid.
The coke lawnmower.
Yeah, the robot got laid.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. Yeah, we just watched that not too long ago.
Heavy Metal was the shit, man. Fucking funny.
Oh my god.
The robot gets the redhead.
Yeah.
And the robot looked like a mouse.
That's right. Yeah, I kind of remember. So we're gonna have to rewatch that probably. We just watched it not too long ago, but I can't remember that much about it.
The Lochnar.
The Lochnar.
Yeah, they need to remake that shit and make it even less PC. It should make it just makes everybody fucking mad. That's the way fucking reading Heavy Metal magazine was like BDSM. It was gonna put you through some shit, especially when you were a kid. It's fucking funny, man. I like that shit.
Thank you, Zach. The Gary Oldman Dracula is one of my all-time favorites, and I wish there was a version of Frankenstein that was on that level of quality to me. Yeah, I kind of feel like, I don't know, like, I feel like...
Yeah, the De Niro one, huh?
Yeah, like I was going to say the Kenneth Branagh one.
Yeah.
That one was, I don't know, I kind of feel like, I saw that in the theater, and I remember kind of liking it at the time, but it was just kind of like, I was like, this is either, like, really awesome or really terrible, and I can't really decide. You know what I mean? So it's one of those kind of things. I do kind of feel like, yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen as many. I don't think I've seen as many adaptations of Frankenstein. I mean, I know there are probably equally as many as there are of Dracula, but I haven't seen as many of them. Obviously, like the first, the James Whale one, Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein are still my go-to because, how can you beat that? You can't. But I do kind of feel like it's long past overdue for somebody somewhere to do maybe a series that is actually like faithful to the book. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like the one with the Robert De Niro, like I said, it was fairly faithful to the book because I do kind of feel like a lot of the movies leave out the whole Arctic situation and all that kind of stuff. And I do remember that movie having that. And I think that was the first time I was like, oh wow, they actually did this in the movie where they don't usually. But I don't know.
Serpent Surfer comes and goes, no, it was called Plutonium Nyborg. Nosedive. They fucking jump it.
Yeah, that's
Plutonium Nyborg, yeah.
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 But yeah, I want to say too, like, there have also been a couple of movies. Actually, I think there were 3 movies that I know of that were not an adaptation, but were actually fictionalizations of this particular incident that we're talking about, like the summer of 1816, like the origin of Frankenstein. One of those was called Gothic. It was directed by Ken Russell, and that came out in 1986. That's actually my favorite one. There was also one called Haunted Summer, which came out, I think that came out in 1988. That one's pretty good, too. It's a little overripe. I kind of want to say Julian Sands was in it, but I might be wrong about that. And I think, so I've seen both of those, and those are both worth watching. And then there was a Spanish language one, and I can't remember the title of it, but I haven't seen that one yet. But those are the 3 that I know of. There might be more. So this incident has also been movieized on top of like, and then there was the whole, I was going to say too, there was the whole movie that came out a few years ago, Gods and Monsters, but that was more about James Whale, like as a person and him making Frankenstein. That's also an excellent movie, by the way. Mm-hmm. So yeah. What were you going to say?
Nothing.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say something.
No, I was just looking at it.
Yeah, Mango was just talking about the Kenneth Branagh version. Yeah, it's like, I need to rewatch it, because like I said, I saw it in the theater, and I think that might have been the only time I saw it. And I remember liking it because I was like, oh, this is like pretty close to the book. Like he seemed to go out of his way to make it like book accurate. But then I thought it was like maybe a little bit over the top, but I don't know. I'd have to see it again because it's been such a long time. Also, you guys, do you remember that movie from 1985, The Bride, that had Sting and Jennifer Beals in it?
Yeah, I remember seeing the trailer when it came out. It looked cool, but I never did see it.
I was like super into that movie at the time, even though it doesn't really have much of anything to do. I mean, it has something to do with the book, obviously, because Sting plays Victor Frankenstein, but it's kind of like, I don't know. It's like just a really weird, like, we took a lot of poetic license with this story.
Funny thing about Sting is that he could act. He could
Yeah.
act. He just didn't make very many movies.
Yeah. Yeah, he was. I actually really liked him in The Bride.
Yeah.
He plays a good villain. He was good. Like I said, we did Brimstone and Treacle.
He's insufferable, man. That motherfucker's an insufferable fucking cunt.
Well, everybody knows that.
I mean,
Not as insufferable as Bono. But,
yeah. Bono's much worse.
I mean,
Fucking-
Bono's kind of like the gold standard of insufferable.
Yeah. Sting is the kind of motherfucker that would just back off the camera and sit in a lotus position and start fucking playing little fucking guitars and shit, try to get your woman's fucking pants using fucking some kind of Kama Sutra fucking tantras and shit like that. He's gonna do with fucking Indian religions or something like that.
Yeah, he's like on TV talking about
Yeah.
like him and his wife's like tantric 5-hour
trying to
sex session.
Try
or
to get
something.
your woman to crawl up into his lap and shit. And ride on his yanni. His lingam. Yeah.
Ew.
Yes, right. He was hanging out with them fucking Indian dudes that fucking putting those weights on it, stretching it out. You seen that?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that shit, man. I saw a show on that one time, and old man, fucking his shit was dragging on the ground. Fucking, he had it tied around his waist. It looked fake. I was like, nah, he really did that, man. That shit couldn't. There's no way you could get that shit inflated.
Yeah, what would that even...
I don't know. I don't think it worked.
Man, now I'm like thinking
Stretch
about
that shit out
that.
about 3 feet long.
Grody.
Yeah.
What did he want
He
to
was overcompensating.
Did he want to be able to suck his own dick?
That had to be the fucking hidden motive, I think. But that's
the first thing I would think of. It's like, why do you really need one that long? Because that's not gonna help a sister.
Maybe
out,
it was
is
fake. Maybe it was something that they put on there that kind of fucking looks like a fucking big old flaccid dick, and then they're because they work on the streets are like those fakirs.
Yeah.
You know, and they're fake holy men. You know?
Yeah. It's like, look, I'm floating.
Look, I can float. Do you like to float? Float with me.
Yeah, remember that YouTube video? I wish I could
They're like
find that
those-
again.
So I don't know if
Shit was
it
so
might
funny.
have been some kind of where it was attached in a fucking. Might have been attached to something, you know, not other than his dick. But he's pulling it out. I was just going, that looks real, and he's stretching it like that. And it had,
He's jumping rope.
yeah, exactly. I'm going, what the fuck? And you know, it has
Jump
to do
rope with your dick.
You know, and he'll say some shit like, you know, you must. I've expended the lingam, the energy of the universe, energy of creation, the size of my lingam, you know, whatever. Okay, so you got a big dick, which means that you tapped into the force that created the universe. Obi-Wan Kenobi would really like to fucking find out more about that shit. You know what I mean?
So he really thinks he's tapped into the like hidden secrets of the universe because he made his dick longer.
Yeah, making your dick.
That sounds about right.
Making your dick longer
Because your dick is at the center of the universe.
gives you a greater affinity to the force. Basically, is what he's saying.
It's like a lightning rod.
Yeah, like a rod.
You kind of hold it up and it kind
Right.
of wilts.
And then you walk around a crowd of people in India and they're amazed and they give you money. And I guess dudes give you money in hopes that their dicks will get big. Yeah. It's like,
This whole racket they have worked out.
it's a racket thing, you know what I mean? Fucking, they don't have them vacuum pumps down there in India. They can't
guess
afford to
not.
vacuum. It's just wishful thinking. They give one big dick motherfucker some money and you sit back and wait for it to happen. Yeah, waiting for that spiritual energy to flow through it.
Whoosh. Turn your dick into a garden hose.
But you know, it's been so long since I've seen that.
You could totally be pulling this out of your ass.
No.
Well, not totally
What I'm
pulling
saying
it
is,
out.
it's been so long since I've seen it. If I were to see it again, maybe it wouldn't fool me if it was fake.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't looking for any kind of sleight of hand tricks. I wasn't 100% certain that was a dick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There might have been something else.
Well, you're not used to seeing
something
one
like
that's
that. It's just like 3 or 4 feet long, and he's like
that shaped or
talking about it,
sized.
and doing like this and pulling that shit out like it's a hose and shit. Yeah, you guys can look
He's
it up.
lassoing people with it.
Talking to people with it in his hand and shit. Like, dude, wash your hands, man. Fucking trying to shake hands with people. I don't know how to wash your hands, bro. But you guys can go back and look at that. I think I actually saw that on YouTube.
Of course you did.
Yeah, I think it was on YouTube. But it was like off of something from television that they had. You know what I mean? They just
Can
lifted
you
it
imagine
off
how
of
dirty
television.
his fucking dick would get? You'd have to like roll it up and like
He had it tied around and shit like that.
and you'd have to put like a twist tie around it.
Yeah. And he wasn't by himself. He was with like 4 other dudes that had their own specialties. You know, it's kind of like a traveling circus on the streets. Like some dudes were actually, you know, charming cobras and shit. And he's like, charm this cobra.
Right? And then use the big dick.
Watch out, it's spitting. It's a spitting cobra. Look at the
Everyone's
hood
like,
on it.
"Ah."
at the hood on it. Yeah.
Front rows will get wet. They give you like plastic fucking slickers and stuff to like put on like they do at SeaWorld.
Stop propaganda says I think he wraps it around a stick. I think that's right. That sounds really.
Yeah,
you saw it too. You saw it too.
I've seen. I think there's more than one dude that does that. I think that's just kind of like that Indian rope trick thing. It's like that's kind of one of their arsenal of like little magic tricks or whatever. That
it might have been a magic trick.
I'm sure it probably was. I don't think that. I mean, you know. You can stretch your skin out to a certain extent because, you know, people do it with their ears, like with gauges and stuff like that if you do it slowly. But
they got those Japanese guys that go to those dick festivals and they hang like a 50. The Chinese do it too. I think it was the Chinese that they both do have the dick festivals, but the Chinese were doing things like tying 50-pound weights and swinging it like that, and they're wearing their fucking kung fu outfits, and it's supposed to be like a proof of fucking your strength. I'm not seeing
even
that.
My dick can lift 50 pounds.
Yeah, I'm not really seeing any strength there. You know what I mean? Fucking, and I'm like, fucking, dude, man, pull that shit off. Let's see see that thing. Yeah, because there's no proof that there's a weight tied to your dick. You know
it
what I mean?
could just be styrofoam.
Yeah, it might be just tied around
Wasn't there a dude at the Jim Rose Circus sideshow that had that? Mr. Lifto. Mr. Lifto. He didn't just do his dick. I think he had like cement blocks hanging from his nipples and his dick and stuff like that. So yeah. So
if you ask me, those are all
it's a carny thing.
If you ask me, those dudes were all just trying to cash in on failed dick expansion experiments. If I tie a 20-pound weight to the end of my dick, I might have a foot-long dick after a year or so. And
hey, Subway, here's my foot long.
And then he fucking comes back, he only got like 3 extra inches on it, so his 4-inch ass is fucking walking around that shit. He's like, man, that's it. I gotta figure out how to make money off this.
Yeah.
You know, I was gonna sell this shit to the women, but they're not buying. 4 inches wasn't enough. So, you know, it's got to be something like that. I'm trying to mansplain to myself how a motherfucker stumbles into tying a 20-pound dick to you, or 20-pound weight to your dick.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know like the
to prove spiritual power.
The series of happenstances that led to that outcome.
I'm not buying in this religious explanation of spiritual power. I don't think that's what it was. I think that was I think that was Viagra / dick expansion.
Yeah, that spiritual shit. That was like some justification after the fact.
After the fact, yeah.
Yes,
it's like,
that's
well,
what that was.
I was trying to have a greater connection to the yang force of the universe, you know.
The dick at the center of the universe.
Yeah, the dick at the center of the universe that created everything.
It's right in the middle of that galaxy. It's all spinning around in this one big old dick.
Yeah, it's a pussy inside a dick, and it this and that. It spins, it makes a bunch of noises, and then what squirts out of it is fucking the universe, of course. Like what always happens.
Don't think that somebody didn't come up with that shit, because you know that they did.
Yes.
Back in the old days.
Some dude fucking boiled it all down to, well, it's about fucking.
Yeah.
The universe is about fucking.
It's like, yeah, my jizz spray just like that created the whole universe.
And it's just there it is. Like, man, cool story, man. That's good. We're gonna go with that. We're gonna go with that.
Yeah, I suppose so. Oh my god.
Pass that joint.
So yeah.
Okay, that's what they're doing.
Like, how did we even? How does this always happen? How does this always happen?
This is this show.
We're doing a show about Mary Shelley, and all of a sudden we're talking about.
This is this show, and I'm fucking on it.
And then suddenly we're talking about a dick and jizz creating the universe.
Yeah.
How does this happen? I don't even know. Now I have to go back through all the steps, like to see.
I don't know.
Oh my god.
I don't know.
Oh my god. So we're already like an hour in. I mean, we did kind of talk about Frankenstein.
Yeah,
we're talking about it. We're going off on tangents, like I said.
Yeah.
Tangents. That's why everybody watches the show, is because we don't even know how this shit happens. Yeah. I certainly don't know how it happens. But you know, because
I'm gonna let it ride.
It's okay.
I'm just gonna let Jenny handle her business.
You gonna let me handle the business? Yeah. Well, you guys, you know this. You know about this. You know about this story.
Yeah.
So you can.
I'll chip in when
you can like chip in.
It's appropriate.
So let's kind of talk about Mary Shelley a little bit, because I do kind of feel like her background, her upbringing, stuff like that did actually, like I mentioned earlier, kind of like inform her later writing of Frankenstein, and led to a lot of the things that happened in her life that maybe, because this poor girl, I mean, she had some like bad shit happen to her, man. Like there was a lot of like deaths. She pretty much survived every single person in her entire life she loved.
That was kind of common though in that era.
It was, I guess, but I mean, even by that metric, she did actually like endure a lot of tragedy in her life in regards to like people close to her dying.
There's a lot of stories of dudes in the 1800s, trying to make a living in a town or a city, and then you follow their family life and you find that, goddamn, everybody he knows is now dead. His wife's dead, his fucking kids died, and then they kept on going. They just remarry and get another one, and
I mean, see that's
some of them broke down though. They couldn't take it, and then they died.
I mean, that's what happened back in the day when, one, they didn't really know that germs cause disease. Yeah. So surgeons be like reaching their dirty ass hands inside of your body.
No antibiotics. That had a lot
no antibiotics. Yeah. Nobody.
TB got them.
Yeah, nobody really understood that like you shouldn't drink water that has like shit molecules in it.
You're right. Nobody knew you really weren't supposed to be constantly drinking alcohol all day long.
Although I will say that
may have saved them though.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. In a lot of situations, particularly, and I was reading about this like in Britain, like before they figured out, they figured out that like shit water was like not good drink, that they would kill you. Probably people that just drank beer for every meal and didn't drink any water were probably much healthier than people that drank the water, because the water was like full of microorganisms.
I don't give a fuck what they say they were eating. When you see photographs of people from the 1800s, even late 1800s, that's when there was photography. I can just tell by those builds, they are extremely low protein diet, extremely low.
Well, it was hard to get hold of. Yeah. I mean, Well,
that leaves you open to a lot of things. Little bitty narrow shoulders, which means when during their formative years they weren't eating well. They just eat crap. Bread, probably. Yeah, bread.
And you have to think, too, that even, like, photography, when it was a new phenomenon, it was very expensive. So the photographs that you're seeing from early days of photography were generally, like, upper middle class to upper class people, because lower class people cannot afford to get photographed generally. Right. So even then, you're seeing
like good specimens.
Wealthy people of the time. So you can imagine that people that lived in poverty looked like a million times worse.
Yeah. Well, they probably looked 30 years older than they really were.
Oh, I'm sure.
And probably pretty small. I mean, because they're people that could afford photography. A lot of the guys, when you looked at their head to shoulder ratio, little bitty upper body, little upper rib cages. I mean, rib cages like a fucking 12-year-old boy, which that's a sure sign of malnutrition. What are you doing? What are you doing? I've never seen you do that.
No, that's what I was telling you.
Get down.
See, I'm afraid that picture is going to fall on her head. Off. So it's like, I might have to take it down. She thinks there's something behind that wall. That's what I was telling you.
I know what it is.
Yeah.
See the cat's tail?
Yeah.
In the drawing? She thinks that's a lizard.
Oh, maybe.
She thinks it's a lizard tail.
Yeah, she keeps going up there scratching, like trying to... Well, she's trying to get through the mirror, too.
Right, she's trying to get behind her where that lizard
You got to watch her, because, like I said, I'm kind of afraid that she's going to knock that off.
She, what I was going to say is I've seen photographs of those dudes, and that's definite signs of malnutrition. And what that does is during your formative years, it affects IQ. It also just affects health in general. If they get sick, they don't have the strength to fight it off,
Yeah, people drop them like flies back there. I mean, people like shit that people wouldn't even really notice nowadays, like an illness that people wouldn't really notice, or it would just be like, oh, a couple days and you're fine.
It'd kill them back then.
It would kill them back then, which, like I said, life was kind of not even for people with money. It really wasn't all that fantastic. And like I said, most of the, a lot of the babies died very young.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that happened a lot to Mary Shelley. So, yeah.
A lot of it was knowledge.
Yeah.
Had they known, they could have avoided a lot of that shit. They didn't even know.
Yeah, like I said, so much shit was alleviated just because of simple, hand washing.
Yeah.
And that was something that really didn't occur to people, like cleanliness in general. Like, hey, let's not have an open sewer, through the streets of the city. Which, duh, but that seems like common sense, but it wasn't for, a really long time. This is how
bad it was. I want you people to kind of wrap your mind around it. The Palace of Versailles, which is fucking one of the biggest fucking most opulent palaces ever over in fucking France, right? You had some of the fucking great kings and royalties. It's still there. It's beautiful. They forgot to put fucking bathrooms in it.
Yeah.
Because the king don't shit. You know, there's no bathrooms in it. So they'd have huge parties. Guess what? They just pissed in the fucking stairwells. They said it was fucking nasty. After those parties, they'd be going
just
behind
poop in pots and like throw it out the window.
In the fucking stairwells. And it was kind of, the palace was more kind, and this is in the fucking huge fucking palace. Pissing behind the draperies, noble and fucking royalty were doing that.
Yeah, here I'm being sneaky.
They're just sneaking behind, going behind, taking a piss. And then they had dogs running around, and the dogs would piss too. They said you couldn't go up, every time you go up and down the stairs, it was like going through a waterfall of fucking piss. And it's almost kind of like they didn't know any better.
Which, like I said, it's crazy.
It's crazy when you think about it.
It is. You know, and as I think I mentioned on the last show that I'm rereading Drood, the novel by Dan Simmons, which, if you didn't know, is set in the 1860s in London, because it's about Charles Dickens and Wilkie Collins and stuff. And he goes a lot into what the London of the 1860s was like. And it was basically the same thing. There's, you know, Charles Dickens and Wilkie Collins, you know, in real life were gentlemen. They were like upper class. But they still, you walk through the streets and the streets were just like cesspits of shit. I mean, like, everything got dumped into the Thames, into the river.
Yeah.
And there was one point, I think it was 1865, I want to say, or something like that. This one year, it was called the Great Stink, where the river smelled so bad that people, like, if you could afford to leave, what are you doing? Stop, please stop.
Stop tearing shit up, Pope.
Please stop.
She wants attention.
Yeah. That the smell was so bad that, like, if you could afford to leave the city, everybody had to leave. They had to go, like, out of the country because people were just, like, the smell was just overpowering of just, like, poop and dead bodies in the river because everybody just thought, well, we'll just put it in the river, like, the water will make it go away, I guess, but it just stays there.
There was no waste disposal in most of these cities. No centralized, and when they did, maybe it was just so simple, it teams of guys in carts.
Yeah, it's like you'd go and they'd have like people that were basically freelancers that would kind of go and sweep stuff up and look through the stuff for valuable things.
Some of these cities had huge problems because it was horse powered, and the horses would just fucking shit on the road. And it would just pile up on the sides of all the roads and of the downtown areas. People had to walk through it, and in some areas like the strikes would happen. There was one I remember. The strikes had happened, and the shit cleaners went on strike for a couple months. And the local government, I can't remember which city it was. It might have been somewhere in Scotland. They still wouldn't yield to the demands. So instead of hiring the guys back to clean the shit out, they just put a new road above the shit. So now you had an underground.
Yeah.
So they just
that might have been Edinburgh.
I think it might have been. Yeah. So now you had an underground thing filled with fucking horse shit and all kinds of criminals and hookers down in there. And then there was a new pile of shit going on that one. It took a
shit
while.
on top of shit.
Shit on top of shit.
It's like a shit sandwich.
Yeah, it took them a while to fucking work something out, and then if I remember correctly, it took 2 or 3 years to finally totally clear the city out. That's how long
because you have to think
out.
how many people and horses and other animals, like, you know, chickens and whatever, like live there every single day. Everybody just shitting in the roads
and just throwing it outside.
I mean, that would add up real quick.
Now this goes back to Mary Shelley and all these people. You know, one of the big reasons why the colonization of the New World had happened with these British and European colonies that were appearing in the New World in America was to get out of that situation. The living was a lot cleaner in the frontier, a lot cleaner. So they were trying to get out of those cities. They were pretty bad, and the chaos was bad in those cities too. So was the crime. People don't realize there was no fucking law enforcement.
Or, I mean, there was, but they really didn't have any
It was
modern...
very superficial.
Yeah. It's like we basically...
Sun went down, you could do whatever you wanted.
I mean, basically, we're going to walk around and like, hey, if you're murdering somebody, hey, you knock that off.
Yeah. No real law enforcement.
That's all they could do.
Yeah.
And they didn't really... I mean, they didn't even have fingerprinting until the very late 19th century.
You needed witnesses, and a lot of times the witnesses they did have were fingering somebody who was innocent. Because you could...
Because you're somebody you didn't like. You're just like, hey, this
like.
motherfucker, I saw him like murdering somebody.
Or you could pay false witnesses to accuse an enemy of yours.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of weird shit they were doing back then. They were crooked. But there was body snatching going on and selling bodies.
Yeah, I kind of want to get into that too.
There's all kinds of shit happening. And then there was people murdering other people to sell their bodies. There were whole gangs that did that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, Burke and Hare are probably the most famous. who started out as grave robbers, but then they were like, hey, let's cut out the middleman and just start like murdering people.
Yeah.
We can get more money that way. Well, you know, that's the logical conclusion.
Europe
right?
and certain places were building cities before they had the same with America.
Before they had their shit together.
Before they had the level of technology and organization
that you would need
to run a city. It was kind of like an accident. A city was an accident. It was something that grew just because there was something
and
there.
they had to figure stuff out as they went along.
Right. No central planning.
Yeah.
Because I think even the Romans had that. The Romans definitely had central planning.
Yeah.
They were running aqueducts and all kinds of shit.
Yeah, because really, if you're going to have a city the size of London, let's say, because that's a massive fucking city, you really need to, like, think about that before you start. Like, where's all these people's shit going to go? Where's the clean water going to come from? So, yeah, but like you said, it happened over centuries, and no one was really planning
You got some
shit.
people that are anarchists. They don't believe in any kind of government. Oh, well, it'll all just work itself out. No, it won't. Go back and look. I don't believe in big fucking overarching governments, but local governments like city governments.
You need organization if that many people are going to live in one. There's just too many logistics.
You need a water department,
too many things that need to be taken care of. Who's going to take the garbage away? Who's going to take care of all this
power
stuff?
production. You need a bunch of shit. You do need security. You need police, posses, or militias, or armies and things to keep outsiders out, to keep bad things from happening from within. You do need. I agree with the anarchists though. There should not be a like overreaching government. There shouldn't be that. They shouldn't be telling you what you're going to do per se with your life or your body. It's just that if you're going to live in a city, you have to help on the infrastructure. So you should pay taxes for water service or pay the bill for the water bill.
Yeah, because everybody benefits from that.
Right. You pay the water bill.
Like I said, as long as what you're doing with your life or your body isn't hurting anybody else, then yeah, that shouldn't be any tip. Now, if your shit is like affecting other people, then yeah.
Like a hoarder, fucking hoarding the shit up, fucking the shit up, making rats and attacking the neighborhood.
Yeah, because you're affecting your whole entire neighborhood.
There has to be sanitation standards.
Yeah. We all kind of have to agree on that. So I do agree. I'm not one of those people. It's like, oh, just let anybody do whatever the fuck they want. Because that's not going to work out.
No,
not going to work out.
You have to there has to be order.
Yeah,
that's basically.
Like I said, there has to be some semblance of. Right. We all have to agree on. Can we have please like clean streets? Can no one like poop in the streets and stuff like that? Which, like I said, it took us upsettingly long to figure out. Right. Which fascinates me.
Where it goes wrong is when they start telling you what to believe, what to think, who you're fucking, what kind of drugs you're going to take, what you're going to buy. That's none of their business.
Like I said, as long as your choices are not affecting other people or society at large,
you have to protect the common good, the common peace.
Yeah. That's other than that, I don't. Like I said, you can fuck whoever you want. You can just it's your body. Put drugs in it if you want to. It's I'm not really worried about it. Like I said, and we've talked about this before. I think that all drugs should be legalized. Yeah, however, I don't think that anybody should be able to like drive a fucking car on public roads fucked up on stuff. Right. But it's just like alcohol. Yeah. So to an extent, as long as you're staying in your own house, do whatever the fuck you want. I don't care. But if you're going out like affecting the public, then that should be
a society that prevents freedom but responsibility. You can do all this shit, but if you fuck over other people by doing it, then you're liable. Yeah. You can't go out fucking take LSD and then drive down the fucking freeway at 110. You could
Yeah, that should totally not be.
So you have people who try to argue for or against certain things using extreme. No, it has to be common sense. Yeah, just common sense shit.
Which, like I said, it's do what you want as long as you're not.
As long as you're safe.
Fucking over other people as long as you're safe. Mango says, Drood is a Kraken novel. It is indeed. I'm really enjoying rereading it second time. Because remember I said I read it a couple years back, like I think a year or two after it came out, and I loved it. So I'm rereading it for the show. So I'm very
down by the Mexican border having a hard time. He's got to keep refreshing the chat.
Oh, shit.
Bee's Nest is my physical education student. He's getting swole. Looking good.
Scott says Amsterdam used to have shit barges that would go from house to house along a canal and empty their latrine pits at night. Yeah. Yeah, you had what did they used to call it? I remember reading a book about this because this is the kind of thing that I read books about. And what did they call it? They called the poop. They had like a euphemism for it. Night soil. Night soil. So you would have like these kind of, it was obviously the lower class people, but people that needed a job, and they go around to people's houses and collect all the shit from their overnight, their chamber pots, and a lot of them would like dig through it like it was once it had been like dumped in the sewers, you'd get kind of like people digging through it, like looking for valuables and stuff.
The Old South used to have hooker ships going up and down the Mississippi River, the big old paddle boats filled with hookers. And it was kind of like a mobile hooker hotel. And it would stop off at a port and all the hookers would go out and it was a party. And then they'd
it's like the hooker party barge.
Yeah, and then they'd get back on the barge and go to the next. And they were kind of being banished.
It's like a cruise in reverse.
Yeah, but what's funny is like nobody wanted them. None of the fucking local, nobody wanted, none of the local governments wanted them. So they were constantly jumping from one port to the next and trying to ply the trade secretly before there was a government
That's
response.
actually a pretty good idea because you'd get in less trouble probably doing that than if you tried to set up a brothel.
You couldn't stay. So you had to be moving, constantly moving, and you jump out. And the local authorities, you could bribe them, evidently, what was going on. They weren't supposed to have that thing fucking in the port, but for a certain amount of money, they might give it 24 hours. That's evidently what was going on.
And they'll just be, we'll just pretend we didn't see the shit there.
Yeah, we'll respond tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thank you. Cha-ching, fucking...
Yeah, there was a lot of that shit going on.
A lot of that shit was going on.
That was another book I read, too, about, like, a lot of the whole brothel scene, like, in England. And it was fascinating. I mean, all that kind of shit is, like, fascinating to me. All that kind of, like... I love all the sordid history.
Yeah.
Like, stuff they don't... stuff you wouldn't maybe necessarily think of or, that they don't really teach you in school. But I like all those little hidden byways of history, which, like I said, I think is why I'm so into this story. So, all right. So, Stop Prop says, ever been outside CBGB? Yeah, I've heard that place is a shithole. Yeah. It's not, they closed it now, right?
Gone now.
Yeah, I think it's gone now. That's, end of an era. But yeah, that was kind of that was one of the appeals of it, though, was that it was such a fucking shithole.
Yeah, dog shit on the floor and stuff.
Yeah, well, punk rockers.
Yeah.
All your crust punks, they were into it probably, or pretended they were.
During the time I was in there, they didn't have the dog shit though. That was like way back in the day.
Well, at least they cleaned up the dog.
There was a much better place in Detroit. It was called fucking City Club. I liked City Club. It was a lot better. City Club and St. Andrews Hall. That was another one. That was good.
Bee's Nest says, I sell cadavers as a side job. Yeah. Well, someone's got to. So, all right. So, Mary Shelley was actually born in 1797. Now, you have to think, around this time period, this was, I kind of feel like I said, we talk about Enlightenment, we talk about like the scientific revolution, all that kind of stuff. Something that was going on a lot in this time period before they had completely understood the nature of life. This was prior to Charles Darwin's, Origin of Species. This is prior to a lot of things. So I kind of feel like one of the big things at this point, everyone was really interested in biology, and they were interested in maybe we'll be able to like reanimate the dead. So I kind of feel like that was something that was, at least in intellectual circles and scientific circles, was something that they thought was a pretty, that seemed like something that could be done. Because electricity and magnetism and stuff like that, no one really understood what its implications, like what its full implications were.
Yeah, and they were shocking little frog legs and shit. And the frog legs would start kicking it. They would even shock fucking dead bodies of humans, and they'd start moving.
Yeah.
And what was funny is that, on a side note, the Japanese knew about this. They were writing about it and talking about it back in Japan, and they were tripping the fuck out.
Well,
about what white people were doing with damn electricity and dead bodies. And there was a Japanese offshoot of that. Imagine that. They're hearing about it and they're imagining and evidently there's like Japanese
like,
books.
What the fuck are they doing over there?
And illustrations and they're dramatizing it and fucking, I'd imagine they tripped the fuck out in Japan.
Yeah, they probably did.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Mary Shelley, she was a kid around this time period. And like I said, because her parents were very well known, like in intellectual circles, they were both philosophers and writers. So she actually, in her household, there were a lot of, intellectuals, like philosophical thinkers, scientists, stuff like that. So she would have been, even when she was a kid, she would have been privy to all of these sort of like conversations about what was going on in the scientific establishment at the time. And as I said, one of the big things was the powers of electricity, the powers of magnetism. And one of the things they were talking about is that maybe through electricity and magnetism, we can reanimate the dead. And like you said, there had been some experiments. Galvani was doing the experiments with frog legs.
Yeah.
And they would shock the frogs and like they would move. And like nobody understood, they didn't really understood that was just like a nerve. The frog is still dead, obviously. But they thought, well, movement, that equals
Means
life.
yeah.
Right? So they thought, oh my God, we're going to like bring some shit back from the dead. So they would do it like, that murderers or whatever would get like hanged, and then they would do experiments on them like in front of big, things full of like audiences full of people, and they'd be like, look, and they'd shock and their arms would move, and they'd be like, oh, you know what I mean? You brought him back from the dead. Oh my God. It's like man's usurping the power of God. So it was just kind of like this big idea that was kind of around at the time, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it was going worldwide.
Yeah.
Now, when the Japanese found about it, it might have been, it was going to probably be after the Oliver Perry fucking thing when Japan opened up. But I saw people talking about in excerpts from the books that they wrote about this kind of shit, and it was probably decades later. But the Japanese they were tripping over that.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
I can't imagine.
People in another culture are trying to bring back the dead. That would blow your fucking mind if you were Japanese. You know what I mean?
Well, it seemed to be blowing Europeans' minds too, because everybody was like talking about it.
Right.
It seemed like a big topic of discussion at the time, that we can just like apply this magical electricity, this newfangled thing, and it looks like we're bringing dead bodies back to life, and like the implications of that must have been like really mind blowing. Even though obviously we know from nowadays that wasn't what was happening.
No.
But they didn't know. So it seemed like a really big deal. So that's something that was like really in the culture at the time, that a lot of
it's close to what was happening. I mean, it's electrochemical.
Yeah.
You send a fucking electricity through any muscle mass on the nerves, it'll fucking twitch. But that's not the same as life for the fucking what's happening inside the mind.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it's just like a bodily. It doesn't have anything to do with. I think we like glitched out a little bit, but I think we're okay now.
Right here. Yeah.
DJ Maniac, who comes in saying first, even though we've been on for an hour and 15 minutes, very
Come
fun.
on, man.
He also says your kids are coming to see me next month. Which kids would the?
Talking about A Starry Night.
Oh, those kids.
Told them said make sure to tell them we said hi.
That's pretty awesome. We just saw them at the Absolution Festival.
What city is that? Where are they going?
Yeah, where is that? Are they going over to?
I don't remember where.
I know they played in Germany and shit like that a lot of times. Yeah. They did like a tour over there a couple years back.
Yeah.
So okay, so as I said,
New
Mary's.
York.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, New York City.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
That's pretty cool. Yeah,
they put on a good show.
They do. Tell them.
I get pissed their sets aren't quite long enough, but
we always bitch at them. But I don't know. They're just kind of probably like, one, we don't want to play that long, and two, it's like it's better to like leave people wanting more than like, motherfucker, get off.
They got 3 albums, and it's all fucking, every one of those albums is good, man. They could get up there and play for fucking 2 hours. I'd fucking love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They probably don't want to do that.
No, they don't want to do that.
I can't blame them. But yeah, so like I said, so Mary was born in 1797. So her dad was William Godwin, who was a very well-known radical philosopher, a bit of an anarchist. I don't know if I'd say anarchist, but he was very into revolutionary, like I said, very anti-authority, very anti-religion, kind of, I guess what you call, or at least back in those days, a libertarian sort of thing, where he was very into like individual rights, rights of women, stuff like that. Which was kind of a big deal at the time. So he actually wrote a book about essentially like equality, like everyone should have the same access to justice and stuff. Again, a very revolutionary idea for the time. And that was kind of like, among British radicals, that was kind of like a really one of their big textbooks.
A lot of that shit was linked up with kind of like free. You take it for granted, but like what they call free love movements. Women should have rights. They should have the right to keep pussy. That's what they're talking about. Because they couldn't. They didn't back then.
Yeah.
A woman couldn't have sex with you, not without her father's permission.
Well, both
fucking shit like that. You're like, wait a minute, what?
Mary Shelley's mother and her father were both advocates of free love. They were anti-marriage in principle.
Yeah, you don't have to.
Although they were married. Yeah, they were very much against. Right. They were basically like, you do you kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's a very, the modern, when you say free love or women's rights, it has a very different flavor when you hear that with modern ears. You have to fucking go back in time and see how women lived back then. You'd know exactly what they were talking about. A woman should have the right to sleep wherever she wants to. She should have the right to make a living, to fucking get a job. Okay.
Which she couldn't.
Which they couldn't.
back then. Nope.
You should have the right to own a house and have a bank
Which
account.
you couldn't back
Which
then.
you couldn't back then.
In the U.S., they were not allowed to. A married woman could not have a bank account or a credit card in just her name until 1974.
Yeah.
That's in my lifetime.
Yeah.
That's in your lifetime.
Yeah. It seems insane.
That is insane.
Yeah.
That is insane. But it was just kind of considered for a long time, even though this wasn't even the reality on the ground, even back in the exalted 50s, because most women actually did have to work.
Yeah.
But the way that it was set up was that you were expected to, marry a man, and the man was supposed to support you. You were supposed to keep house and raise kids and shit like that. And it was not... So it wasn't really there wasn't really much mechanism in the culture at large for women to make their own way. So if your husband died or left you or something like that, you were kind of fucked.
So the women's rights movements of the 17 and 1800s, by today's standards, were extreme common sense. Extreme common sense.
Yeah, by today's standards, everyone's like, well,
what?
duh.
Yeah.
But back then, it was like a big deal. I mean, that was something that like nobody was talking about because everyone just considered that women didn't need to be educated. They didn't. They just needed to be married off, and then they were supposed to like just keep house and have kids for a man.
That a woman should have the right to choose who she marries. That's another one because they mostly didn't. The dad said who.
Yeah, they kind of set them all up.
Yeah.
Not exactly arranged marriages, but
a lot of times they were.
They kind of were in practice. Not gonna lie.
You could buy a daughter, basically.
Yeah.
You could buy a man's daughter, dowries and weird things like that.
Yeah, particularly in the upper middle class to upper class.
If you were a really rich guy and you wanted somebody's young daughter, you were gonna get her, especially if she was poor.
Yeah. Yeah, because she didn't have a choice.
No, you could go in there and buy her, basically. If the family liked you, which they would if you had the money, and then you paid the right dowries and hooked the family up the right way, you'd get the wife. And the mom would be like, oh, no, this is for your future. Blah, 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 and they would talk her into it. Because it was more about security. It wasn't about love. It was security.
Yeah. And I think even a lot of marriages that, were chosen were not chosen for reasons of, oh, I'm in love with this person and I want to marry them. It was all like a business transaction, essentially. Does this person have enough money to support me in the manner to which I am accustomed?
If you go back into the writings of the time, most women were happiest when they became widows. Because they were now free.
Yeah.
And they were actually free to pursue their own ends. And a lot of them, when the husband died, they actually had money and some security if the guy had hooked her up right. But not so much in the working class. Actually, the poor women were a lot freer than...
In some ways, yeah.
Poor women were...
I mean, you're not freer because you're broke. And being broke is its own kind of slavery, really.
Yeah, but on the upside, nobody cared what you did.
That's true. So it was kind of like it was a balance.
Right.
But if you had money, everybody was absolutely like looking at you, and you could be.
We got into this before. Some of the freest women in the United States back in the olden days were like octoroon, quadroon women, black women, and Indian women. Because they didn't have to play by the white people's rules.
And like I said, I was reading a couple of books about essentially like the history of prostitution. And actually during this time period in the UK, the women that were the freest, from today's perspective, would have been women that owned brothels.
Yeah.
And women that worked in brothels.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not a great life if you didn't choose that, but they actually could do pretty much whatever they wanted, and they could operate within higher social circles they had a whiff of kind of like the society ladies obviously would look down on them, but they could pretty much do whatever they wanted.
Player hate.
Yeah, they could pretty much do whatever they wanted. They could own property, they had their own money. And they were they didn't have to like listen to no man telling them what to do and shit like that.
Louisiana fucking octoroon, quadroon women were the geisha of the fucking of America. And there's portraits of them. They had a lot of money, they had a lot of power, they're powerful friends. They were kind of like the rock stars. Same thing with some of those women, the steamboat type women. And if you were a modern woman and you had to go back to a fucking time machine to the fucking 1700s, when you got back there, fucking really the only thing you would ever consider would be that lifestyle. You wouldn't want any of the other
Yeah, I
lifestyles.
wouldn't really want to. I don't think I could live under those constraints.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because in France, at least, I'm not sure if they call it this in other places, but they actually had a word for this. It's called demi-monde, which is like half-world. So it's almost, it was like a subculture. And these were people that could operate at several different layers of society. And they, like I said, they had a whiff of indiscretion about them.
Yeah.
Like they couldn't be seen at the best places and everything because everyone would be like, oh, and they'd all cluck at them.
Yeah.
But in practice, I mean, they were pretty free to like operate essentially as they wished, which a lot of people were not.
And what's funny is that the difference between these demi-monde and the real rich guys, especially young real rich guys, was about nil. That was almost the same scene.
And interestingly, a lot of women that started out as prostitutes and then went on to become like brothel owners, particularly in the UK, like became very, very wealthy and also had their own like salons. So they would have like all these like, so they were kind of up in the scene, like all the intellectuals, you know, the writers and painters and shit like that. So they were kind of like in the center of all the shit that was like.
Lawmakers and powerful politician type guys too.
Yep, that too.
They had their fingers in all that. And fucking organized crime.
Yep.
That was the go-betweens for the political class and the oligarch class and organized crime. They all knew the same madams.
Because you have to think that was like the only legit path of women to power in that time period. Because like I said, for most women, you couldn't really have your own money. You couldn't have a life of your own, really. You were always kind of like attached to somebody else. I mean, obviously there was exceptions to that. But, you know, if you just came from the working classes or you came from, you know, somewhere where you didn't have family money, you had to like make your own fucking way somehow. And that's how some women did it. And I don't blame them in the least.
In a way, though, the madams and the brothel women were kind of like... one of the greatest examples of natural selection, really, because the best kind of rose to the top. So in a way, it was kind of like they had earned their positions. They weren't born with them.
Well, yeah, because like I said, most of them came from the working classes, and they just kind of they were savvy enough.
Yeah, character-wise, they would have been freaking quite cool.
Yeah, and that's the impression I got too, like from at least the ones that I read about.
Yeah.
So William Godwin, like I said, that was her dad, and he was very ahead of his time in thinking that women should also be educated just as men should. He didn't really seem to think that women were any lesser or they were less intelligent or anything like that. So he took great pains, even though Mary Shelley didn't have a great deal of formal education, he took great pains he opened up his library to her. He let her be privy to all of these, other intellectuals that came and hung out at their house. And he got her tutors and things like that. So she was very much educated beyond what a typical woman at the time would have been educated by. Also, her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, probably, I guess you could call her the founder of feminism, really. Yeah. She actually wrote a book, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, which is actually still taught in colleges to this day, and sounds actually pretty modern to our eyes. But yeah, she was very much on the cutting edge of absolutely believing that women were equal in every way to men and should be treated as such.
All that shit makes sense because over here in the United States, especially back in the 1500s, 16, 17, 1800s, you kind of had to get it as you lived. So it was all about practicality. A lot of these old rules they didn't work. They couldn't work in the New World.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the thing, and this kind of happens, in general, is that I think that people's attitudes and stuff like that, the greater culture is always kind of like lagging behind a little bit.
Yeah, it's like they're behind, right? Yeah.
Well, because it takes a long time for mechanisms to like catch up to it. So even though, I mean, you have to think this is way before. I mean, this is like 1800 we're talking about, and Mary Wollstonecraft is talking about. How she thought that women should have the same rights as men, which, not a lot of people were talking about. This is a very kind of fringe, belief at the time. And this was even way before like the suffragette movement, all of that kind of stuff. Because in case you didn't know, like I think it happened quicker in Europe, but even women weren't even allowed to vote in the U.S. until 1921.
Yeah.
Not really that long. My grandmother was alive when that happened, so that's not really that long ago. I think Europe was quicker, depending on whatever country you're talking about. But even back in 1800, Mary Wollstonecraft was talking about, obviously women should have the same rights as men. One of the quotes that I liked from her, she said, this was from her book, she says, "From the tyranny of man, I firmly believe the greater number of female follies proceed. Let women share the rights, and she will emulate the virtues of man, for she must grow more perfect when emancipated." So she's basically saying all the fucked up shit you don't like about women is just caused by men, like, crushing them under their heel, basically. And if they were freed, they would act just the same.
Well, they didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
They didn't have to do much. Except maybe do laundry, raise children.
Although
that's fucking tough.
Well,
work,
back in those days, that was like even word. Like nowadays,
that's nothing. But
it's kind of shitty, and it
took all day to do laundry back then.
It did, because nobody had washing machines or dishwashers or anything. You had to do everything by hand, unless you had servants, which a lot of people did not. So interestingly, even though, like I said, both Mary Wollstonecraft and William Godwin were kind of, like I said, in principle, they were kind of against marriage. They were married. But I don't know if they just kind of felt like if it was forced on people, then it was not good, because it was like a form of slavery type of thing. Yeah. But they were married.
They were like Star Trek before Star Trek.
They were.
You're Captain Kirk back in the 60s saying this shit. Well, you get married, you get married. It doesn't matter. Fucking in the original Star Trek, they're actually espousing things that they're just dreaming about in 1816.
Yeah. Honestly, it must have been really shitty to have these attitudes back then.
Depending on where you were.
Depending on where you were, because really, I mean, it's kind of like nowadays. It's like it's nothing, because most people are like,
there were free love communes in the 1800s. There was all kind, and it was a sparsely populated area. You could always find like minds. And that's probably what was going on. And there wasn't a social media. The world was a lot smaller then. If you ended up in a place, I don't know, like the French Quarter, and with an apartment there, you'd probably have a fucking good time. And live your whole life as a woman and not really be impeded by any of this. Because that area was like a free and neutral zone.
Yeah.
Now, would it be like that out on a prairie somewhere? No. Fuck no. But what would you be doing down there?
Yeah.
Surviving on the prairie.
Yeah.
So, I think even though the system was fucked up, there was a lot of different environments to choose from. You could find your place in the world, even if that meant joining the Indian tribes, which a lot of women did. A lot of white women joined Indian tribes.
Like I said, can't say I blame them.
And that was a lot better life than living on the city. And it was mobile, and that was kind of like women's liberation in a way. To be a tribal woman, they didn't have those same restrictions. They did have gender roles, but the gender roles were kind of empowered with Native Americans to a certain extent.
Well, I kind of feel like they were more like, well, we're all in this together, and we just got to like work to do whatever has to be done, and they weren't really worried about. They weren't worried as much about well, the woman's got to do this, or the man's got to do that. It's just something's got to be done.
Tribal.
Somebody do it.
It was tribal.
Somebody do it. We don't care who.
Right. Yeah. Well, it was tribal. It was just tribal customs, and it was being real practical. That was always been said over and over again about most of those Native American tribes, is that it was more about practicality.
That's what I'm saying.
Just getting shit done.
It's more like just getting shit done. I don't care who does it.
Right.
Doesn't have to be a boy thing or a girl thing. Just somebody please fucking do it. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it depends. There was strict gender roles with Indian tribes. Dudes had to have warrior virtues. They had to hunt. They had to go to war. There were certain festivals that they had to take part in. So, no, they had a real macho side to that. But they, Indian, evidently, femininity was, about children and supporting the family unit. And, it was reasonable. They weren't saying you couldn't survive on your own. There wasn't a lot of laws.
I think that's where, because obviously there are biological differences. Obviously, like the big one, obviously women can bear children and men cannot. I don't think there are as many differences as people make it out to be, but obviously that's a big difference. So there is going to be some little physiological difference there. But the problem I have arises when, because I kind of feel like, and you see this a lot in like particularly Victorian and this kind of era, is that because femininity was seen as like something different, they always saw it as something lesser. Like women, well, they don't need to be educated, or they're more emotional, or they're dumber, or something like that. They never saw it as like just different but equal. It was always like it's not as good. That it always kind of like came across like that to me.
Garden of Eden stories had a lot to do with that.
Well, oh yeah, big time.
Women were made from Adam. Adam was the standard.
Yeah.
So therefore, the standard by which all humans were judged were by men, basically.
Yep.
Women weren't as strong, they weren't as big. And in the Greek age, weren't as good looking, even though they didn't believe in those same things, but, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what you're saying, I think, is true. It's just that you can't really take it and run with it and generalize, because I don't think all men bought into that either.
No, I'm not saying they did. I'm just saying that the prevailing attitudes of the time, at least from the writings and shit like that have survived, that's one thing that really sticks out to me, is that femininity was always seen as distinct, but also lesser than.
I like to use the Old West examples, you know, Doc Holliday and all those guys that would hang out in those fucking towns. All of them were in love with hookers. Famous hookers. They called them stars back then because they had a star, and they would go up and sing and do shows, which justified why they were hookers, I guess you could say. They didn't want to be hookers. But women don't want to be hookers.
Generally, no. I mean, there are exceptions to that. There are to everything, but in general, no.
Right, no.
It's not.
But
really
that was the
something
situation
most
of
people
the
would choose.
day. That was more freedom than they would have had they been married to some jackhole back in a dumbbell tenement in New York in the 1800s. They would have lived a life in misery, been to ghetto. Okay, so they kept little French poodles and bought little fine things and sang on stage and got all the props from the crowd, and they were very popular. And then they sold their wares to the highest, you know, customers. But they always had a boyfriend, and most of those gunfighters were like the boyfriends. Okay, which is funny, but I guess they knew the deal. She had to make a living somehow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And like I said, there weren't a lot of avenues open.
Weren't a lot of avenues open. So evidently they did fucking have. They were not conventional relationships. But I think they were very human and conventional emotions going on. It's just that they're in a frontier situation.
Yeah.
And she has to make a living, and he can't support her through a life of fucking crime or gunfighting or whatever. And, you know, maybe she's not really eligible for marriage because of her.
She'd be like
I can't really marry her, but I do love her. That kind of. I think they did love those girls because they fucking killed dudes over them.
Yeah.
You know? And got offended and shit when the wrong customer wanted to do business with them and stuff. So, no, there were emotions there.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I'm just saying, not all dudes, and evidently dudes thought that what was going on was fucked up with the women too.
Oh yeah,
so
and I'm sure that there were. Shit. Yeah, I'm just saying that was the prevailing culture of the time. I'm not saying that everyone bought into it because absolutely they didn't.
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence based on fucking testimony of the time. That even the macho men of the time, which would have been gunfighters and fucking lawmen, did not really like what society was pushing on them. It was just that was the society they were born with.
Yeah.
And there didn't seem to be any avenues to change it.
Yeah, you just kind of had to work
with it. It had to evolve
it.
slowly.
Yep.
And really, if you go back in history, it didn't really change until World War II.
That's what I'm saying. So that's what kind of sucks. You live back then, and you're very aware of how fucked up shit is.
Yeah, but you're powerless to do anything.
And you can't really do anything about it, and there aren't really a lot of other people who share your point of view, or at least it seems that way. Right. So there don't really seem to be any avenues open to you to like do anything to change it. So you're just kind of like stuck in this perpetual...
Japan's the same way. Japanese spend a lot of time complaining about Japan, but they don't seem to have any ability to change it.
I mean, it's hard for like just a couple of people to change something.
But the thing is I think it's a large percentage of the fucking Japanese population.
Yeah, that's true.
Don't really like about certain things that happen in Japan, especially in Tokyo, but they're powerless to change it because it's their culture. They don't want to be the first one to stand up.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Well, you're the first one to stand up, you're going to get like hammered down.
Right,
That's probably what they're always afraid of.
Yeah.
Which that's usually what happens to the first person that stands up and said, hey, this is fucked up.
Right.
You really need a lot of people to stand up at once and go, hey, this is fucked up.
Take something like World War II, which is a fucking basically a calamity in a certain sense, but it's also a rebirth.
Yeah.
But it's also the beginning of empire. It becomes very much like the Roman Empire after that.
Yeah.
Over time.
Oracle says Bram Stoker's mother was an early feminist too. She famously said that the first step to curing the world's ills was equalize the sexes. So yeah, there was a lot of this shit going on in the zeitgeist. It took a long time for anything to come about because of it, but all these women back then, they knew the shit was fucked up, man, and they were like brave enough to like fucking talk about it. Gramther's Hammer says, which is worse, draconian 18th century attitudes about women or the current MGTOW movement? I would argue that the 18th century attitudes were way worse because the MGTOW, at least, like I said, men going their own way, I'm like, bye.
They're separatists.
Go.
Yeah, they're not trying to make it.
No one's going to miss you.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that you think that they will, but they won't. Just go away.
I don't think that's what they're thinking.
No, I'm just saying that I just think
like,
that that's...
check it out. All right.
All right. Bye. Like I said.
Dudes have a right to not deal with women. You can't force a dude to deal with women.
No, I wouldn't. I would never imagine that because I don't want to have to be forced to deal with dudes either.
Right.
So it's like if you want to go, just go.
Right.
I am not affected.
Now you sound like a sperm lover.
No, I'm just saying I'm just saying that I'm not affected in the slightest.
Right. They're not trying to affect anybody.
Well, that's good.
That's why he's saying it is the MGTOW thing would be better because the MGTOW
That's what I said.
They're not
forcing their shit on other
force
people.
a woman to comply to anything. They're just going, this is hopeless, and then they're checking out.
Yeah.
Now, do I believe that it's hopeless? Depends on who you are. If I were to see them guys and see their habits, I look at them, I'm like, yeah, you are hopeless. Okay, that might be. So that might be the best strategy for them. Is it hopeless for a popular fucking young male who has a promising future? No, it's not hopeless. Who are you talking about? No. Fuck no. Drop your nuts. Get out there and compete, man. Go fucking get with some women. But here's the deal. And JD saw me do this dude. I had this young guy who was fucking going out with this stripper that we know. He was a good looking guy and she's real cute. Well, she ended up dumping him. And well, he was living off of her and he was just a young guy with nothing under his belt. And I was talking to him and I could tell he was devastated. And I said, well, how old are you? And he goes, well, I just turned, 20. I says, what do you do? He goes, and I said, well, man, when I was your age, I went and joined the army. I went out and
get
did
a job.
Shit. And he's like, yeah. And he says, yeah, you think I lived here in this fucking nightclub? Go out and do something nobody else wants to do. A life of adventure. Something that's hard. Something that you make a lot of money at. And fucking, that motherfucker vanished. Didn't see him for a couple years later. When he came back, the motherfucker looked grisly as shit. And he's like, and he came up and shake my hand. He says, thank you for that talk you gave me. I said, where you been? And he goes, I did exactly what you said, man. I joined a company. I live on an offshore oil rig.
See, there you go.
He goes, I'm making so much money now. Fucking every time I come in, fucking. He goes, I can back my shit up now. And when I get done, man, I'm gonna have a lot of money buying a house and doing this and that. And he goes, I never would have done that. He says, I would have rested back and just tried to mooch off these fucking hot girls. And
that's not your problem.
Yeah.
And this is why. And this is why we might have covered this a little bit on the incel show. I kind of feel like most of these dudes that are like incels and they're constantly whining about how women will sleep with them. I was like, dude, you can't just like sleep on the couch in your mom's basement and play video games all day and expect hot girls to jump on your dick.
Right.
That's not how
it works.
Shit works.
No.
Go get a job. Go be interesting.
Yeah.
Go do something. Do something that makes you interesting.
Dude came in, he's like 22, fucking buffed out man of the sea, grizzly looking and shit, fucking looked like a real warrior. He'd been he'd been spending, I think it was 6 months out of the year on that offshore oil rig, making like $150,000 a year on that oil rig.
See, there you go.
And motherfucker came in with some swag as a young man.
Well, that's all. Like I said, nobody is telling, and like, honestly, don't do it because you want to get pussy. Do it because
you want to
improve yourself.
Yeah,
improve yourself.
That's what I told him. You were standing right there.
Everybody should do that.
Yeah.
Men, women, I don't care who you are.
I said, you need to work on your own shit.
Just worry about yourself.
Yeah, and I said, all that other shit will take care of itself.
Right. Exactly.
Because they don't want some dude just fucking
You can't just expect to just lay around and be this lazy bum that doesn't have anything interesting or they don't create anything.
Chick your magic dick.
Yeah,
Your
it's like
magic
no
dick.
one is. I'm sorry, but like as a woman, no dick is worth that.
Yeah.
Sorry, no dick is worth putting
His
up
little
with that crap.
His little 135-pound ass came back at fucking like 180. Motherfucker was with his little fucking beard and fucking Man of the Sea shit coming in, you know, kind of like that dude from Jaws.
It's like, wait, he's like Quint.
Like Quint from Jaws, yeah.
A doll's
From
eyes.
Jaws. It's like a dog.
God damn, I love Jaws. All right, yeah. Bee's Nest says, I want hot girls to jump on my dick. I have to pay for Mexican.
It wears off.
Yeah, you know, it's like I said, you gotta worry. Is she in the
sink?
Yeah, she likes that sink for some reason.
Yeah.
I find her in there. She just like chills. She's like, what? It's Pookie's eyes. It's exactly Pookie's eyes. So that's what this is. So yeah. So we were talking about Mary Shelley's mom. So like I said, her books. She had written several, and she had a lot of followers. I guess you call them. But you know, she had kind of like a circle around her. And so in a way, these two, like William Godwin and Mary Wollstonecraft, were kind of like a power couple in sort of like the intellectual, free love, revolutionary type circles of the day. Now, sadly, Mary Wollstonecraft, she gave birth to Mary Shelley in 1797. And shortly after she gave birth to her, she developed what they would call childbed fever or something like that. Basically, it's a postpartum infection of the birth canal, which was very, very common in this era, obviously, because no one was washing their fucking hands. So, you know.
Or wasn't a couche.
It was like it was just a dirty business, childbirth. And they weren't super up on the sanitation standards at the time. Mary Wollstonecraft gave birth to Mary Shelley at home, as most people did back then. And sadly, Mary Shelley's mother died 11 days after giving birth to her. So one thing that Mary Shelley had, even from childhood, was she had this lingering guilt that she had essentially killed her mother, even though obviously it wasn't her fault. But I don't know if that ever left her. Another thing, too, was that her mom was, you know, as beloved as her mother was, and she was beloved, her father as well, by, you know, just their circles at large. I kind of feel like her mom also had kind of like a melancholy sort of disposition, which Mary Shelley also inherited. So, you know, that's always going to make life harder for you. And like I said, her mom died in childbirth, so she never really knew her. She was only 11 days old when her mom died. Now, so basically, William Godwin, as I said, you know, because he didn't really have any of the sort of antiquated, you know, gender attitudes of the time, he made damn sure that Mary was educated way beyond what a woman at the time would have been. So basically, he had a bunch of followers as well, as his wife had done. And, you know, particularly among the revolutionaries at the time. So he had kind of like a lot of young disciples, I guess you would call them. One of which was Percy Shelley, who, at the time he first started corresponding with William Godwin, I believe Percy Shelley was 21 years old, and he was going to Oxford, although eventually he'd be kicked out because, for lots of reasons. For his atheism, he was, again, another free love advocate. So he had like a lot of ideas along the same lines as William Godwin's. And so Oxford were like, yeah, get out of here. So he started corresponding with William Godwin, as I said, when he was 21 years old. He was against pretty much everything. He was very anti-marriage. He was very anti-church, like I said. He was very into like equality for everyone. So again, very revolutionary for the time. Now, interestingly, because Percy had been writing letters to William Godwin for a very long time, William Godwin, one thing that he would do was he would read letters from Percy and from others to his family, including Mary Shelley, who was growing up. So basically, by the time Mary was a teenager, she had already like heard a lot about this Percy Shelley person, and he sounded like super fascinating. So she had heard a lot about him before they even met each other. Now, they ended up meeting each other in 1814. Percy Shelley shows up at William Godwin's bookstore that he owned. This was in London's East End. And he had gone there, maybe expressly, perhaps, to get a glimpse of William Godwin's daughter, who he had heard was quite beautiful. She was 16 at this time. He was 21. Like I said, it's a little weird nowadays, but not back then, not so much. So they met each other at the bookshop, and immediately, pa-pow. These two are kind of like, I mean, Percy, like I said, he was very into like equal rights for women and stuff like that too. So he immediately like, there was an immediate like affinity between the two of them. He thought she was just like super intelligent. That they were like soulmates, you know what I mean? He was like immediately they got each other. It was just kind of this thing. Even though she was a little bit younger, but you know. So basically, also he was super into like the ideas of her parents. So he thought that it was cool that, you know, she kind of shared their same beliefs, and he also shared those beliefs. So they had a lot in common. Now, only problem was that when Percy Shelley met Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin at the bookstore that fateful day in 1814, Percy already had a wife. Her name was Harriet, and she was 18. Now, this wasn't a massive problem for Percy because, like I said, he's super into free love, right? So he's just basically like, I got a wife. Man, big deal. I could just, like, bang whoever. So it's just kind of this whole thing.
The free love thing, okay? You can kind of get tainted by your preconceived notions and try to maybe like equate that with be it cults or anything or shit like that. That's not really what they're talking about.
No.
All right. What they're talking about is dating. Okay.
Yeah.
Marriage was something that was forced on you by your parents a lot of times. You were lucky to be married to somebody that you gave a shit about. But then when you start thinking about it, that other person might be a captive too. They're coming from this civilization. So you and your wife might want to date other people who are like you and your wife.
Yeah.
And in your alliance in terms of marriage, it really isn't under threat because everybody's all friends anyway. Nobody's going to run off with anybody. And there's nothing happening behind any other's back. It's not happening behind anybody else's back. Everybody knows. It might be going on with you in the room with it. But you're not jealous because it's all trading and everything. It's just a love fest. So I guess it's kind of like not really like the hippies because the hippies, well, these motherfuckers didn't bathe either. Although I think fucking.
Yeah, this is the 1800s.
Yeah, I think Mary Shelley and fucking Byron and all those guys are probably a little bit cleaner than fucking a hippie of the 70s. Those motherfuckers are probably even dirtier. Because I think they did fucking take baths and they did take sponge baths and shit. And they put on perfume. And they were intelligent enough that if you complained about something, they'd probably correct it. And looking at the paintings, all these people were good looking. Mary Shelley looked pretty
Mary
cute.
Shelley was actually quite
cute.
a beautiful woman.
Yeah, she was cute.
Her mother was also quite beautiful.
Yeah. So, hard to say.
And Percy was a pretty good looking dude himself.
Yeah.
Lord Byron was a good looking dude when he was younger, but I think he had gout, and so he kind of got fat when he was older.
Yeah, okay.
So that's what I remember reading that anyway.
Well, people aged quickly back then anyway.
That's true.
The nutrition wasn't that great.
True.
We take so much for granted of today. Me at 53, the way I look, there would be nobody in that world at 53.
Yeah, they'd all look like
that would look like me.
They'd all look like wizened old codgers.
And with fucking teeth missing and white hair or real fat or fucking dead. If they were alive, they'd be dead. And you take me back to the medieval period, they would have been totally amazed by the fact that I have all my teeth.
Which, like, nowadays, it's not that big a deal because I see people in their 40s and 50s all the time that that don't look like an old person. They just look like...
Oh, no. We go to the club and there's fucking women in their 40s that are just fucking smoking hot. Smoking hot. That didn't exist in this era.
No. I doubt it. It would have been very, very rare. You would have had to have really, really good genetics.
You just go online and there are fucking porn star females in their 50s that are fucking smoking hot still. It's just that just did not. You don't realize how much technology and knowledge have given you. It's just totally different world.
It is.
Totally different world.
Oracle's talking about, oh, wait. Tammy says, I try to tell young girls all the time, don't wait for Prince Charming. Take care of yourself. Yeah, that's like the best advice for anybody, really.
Yeah, and Prince Charming is not going to be too charming most of the time.
No. He might be charming at first, and then he turns out to be like a serial killer or a bomb or something.
A lot of times
like
the ones that look like Prince Charming have, you're not the only woman he's dealing with.
Yeah.
You'd be better off with a fucking dude like Clint. What's his name from Jaws? It's like a doll's eye. Quint, yeah,
Quint's kind of sexy.
Yeah. Well,
in a grizzled old dude sort of way.
Yeah. But no,
at least he was funny.
The problem, what's happening right now, is that we're living in a laptop generation, and more women are coming out of colleges than guys are. They're also they tend to make more money than guys. We're talking about the younger generation for dating and marriage, 20s and 30s. So these women are going to have to realize that the dudes, they're not going to be able to marry a guy richer than them or even equal to them. They're going to be marrying a guy from the working class.
But see, I think nowadays, like people younger than us, like even me, and I was, I'm Generation X, I kind of like figured out when I was pretty young, I'm like, look, I'm just going to have to like take care of myself mostly. It's like, it'd be nice if somebody else came along, but I'm not going to count on that. So, and I kind of feel like everybody should sort of go into it with that attitude.
Yeah, but that's not realistic.
Like cover your own ass.
That's not realistic.
Pretty much.
Because what's realistic is that there's a bunch of basically young women out there with college degrees working in offices that can't find men. That's what realism is, and they can't find men because women instinctively want to date up. Those rich dudes don't want you. I'm just going to tell you the truth, girls. Those women don't want you, or those dudes don't want you. Rich dudes have lots of girlfriends, and they actually go for the hot ones, and the hot ones that are broke. That are fucking, they're not intellectuals. Guys don't want that. They want a chick with fucking big rack, a good body, who's a lot of fun, who probably worked as a stripper for a while. That's who they're fucking going for. They don't give a shit about your degree. They just don't. That's not.
Well, like I said, I figured that out.
Money.
I figured that out when I was a teenager.
Yeah, because they don't need your money.
And that was in the 80s.
Yeah, they don't need your money. A man would actually rather date a woman who doesn't have much, and he feels like he's saving her. That's more of an instinctual.
Well, yeah, because they feel useful.
Well, that's the man's role.
Yeah,
is to help, and to save, and to be the hero. So if you're making a bunch of money in an office, he doesn't see you as attractive. He sees he could go down to the biker bar and fucking some waitress working, big old titty waitress at fucking 23 working behind the bar. He loves that, loves her. Okay. So it's not about gain for the man in a material, in a money sense. So it's just a very different strategy. Women have to realize that if you have money and you're working in these offices, you're going to be dating a guy who's poor, unless he's going to be or he's going to be ugly. Okay, get you a hot poor guy. That's what I'm telling you to do.
Or he's at the same level as you're at.
Same level.
Like I said, and that I kind of feel like that's across the board.
A guy at your same level is usually going out with a poor girl. Fucking, economics has a lot to do with it, because a guy who's making $40,000-$50,000 a year is real attractive to a girl who's working at McDonald's. He's Prince Charming. So he's not looking for an equal. He's looking to be a hero. That's just a very different strategy. And the guys in the comment section are going to agree with me. If you're a woman making a bunch of money, you're a young woman, you're looking for a man, I recommend go for a fucking macho dude who's hot, who doesn't have any money, but he's strong and he knows how to fix things, and he can fucking work on your car, and you fucking help him get a better job, and fucking he'll just run right to that pussy. That's just, and have fun. Don't try to think about...
or honestly, just be a lesbian and don't even worry about any of this crap.
Whatever.
Honestly.
Whatever.
Whatever. Oracle says, midwives versus doctors. Midwives tended to wash their hands before attending someone in labor, and doctors didn't. Yeah, I kind of feel like there was a lot of that going on, too. Because... well, the thing is, doctors at the time were mostly male. They didn't have a lot of experience with women's health, and midwives did, because they weren't really doctors. They mostly just attended births, so they had a lot more experience in that area, so maybe that's why. But, yeah. All right, so where was I? Okay. So what was I saying? So Percy was already married. His wife, Harriet, now we were talking about free love, but Harriet, she didn't know all this shit was going on. Now, Percy and Harriet also already had a kid at this point, and Harriet was pregnant with another one. So it's not so much, because I think Percy's wife, I'm not really entirely sure how he ended up marrying her. So like I said, Percy was only 21, Harry was 18, that's not unusual for that time. It seems very young to us now. But I don't know if it was necessarily arranged or anything like that. I don't know if it was. But Harriet, I don't think she was into the whole free love thing, or she didn't know what was going on, because she got like really mad when she found out. She didn't know all this shit was going on.
Hold on, I must say something. Master of Nuns asking, Tom has a good point, but when you're rich for too long of a time, don't you get bored with the type of women Tom's describing? My answer is no, and Brazil would be the proof. Poor people from Brazil, male or female, come here to Florida and fucking do super well. And matter of fact, on another show, I told a story in the horse industry. A dude that I knew who was a groom from Hipico Paulista in Sao Paulo, he was just nothing but a groom, married a fucking multi-millionaire's fucking daughter. They own a mansion that was 2 miles away from our old house. That dude went from nothing to everything. And why? And this tends to be, in Florida, you'll see Brazilians tend to marry way up. Why? They're charming as fuck. They're very entertaining. No, it doesn't get old. It gets better. They don't have anything. They have a lot of social skills. They look great. They know how to entertain. You give them some money, they actually make more. They know how to work with that. So, no, just because she's poor doesn't mean you'll get bored with her. No, you'll have fun. She might actually blossom. And the dudes do it too. So you don't judge people by their socioeconomic background. It doesn't work that way. Go ahead. It's like, look, man, women will love, if you watch Star Wars, women will prefer fucking Han Solo to fucking Luke Skywalker any day. It's that same thing. Okay, that's all I'm going to say.
You sure?
That's all I'm going to say. Jenny wants to get back to the show.
Well, yeah, look where this thing is.
Damn.
Yeah, see?
Damn.
You talking about all this bullshit, and I'm just
Okay,
I'm not even
bullshit.
like
Okay.
fucking, I'm not even hurt.
Not even scratching the fucking surface.
That's what I'm saying.
God damn.
So you haven't get into the shit yet.
Okay.
So yeah. So Percy's already married, has a kid, and his wife is pregnant. But he has decided, and Mary has also decided, to be fair, that they are soulmates. It's a Romeo and Juliet type of situation. So they start meeting up in secret at St. Pancras Graveyard, which is in North London, which is where Mary Shelley's mother was buried. That's where her grave was. Legend has it that Mary lost her virginity in this cemetery. I don't know if it was on her mom's grave, because that would be a little weird, but it was in that cemetery at least. At least that's what the story says. Now, you have to think, too, that Mary Shelley, I know she was only 16 at this point, but she had been raised in an atmosphere. I mean, both her parents were advocates of free love, women's rights, everything like that. So this wouldn't have been all that weird to her. Yeah, her boyfriend's married, but it's all good. It's just sex, whatever. So they start meeting in secret, like I said. So basically, it's kind of like, I don't know. And Percy was kind of had a lot of the same beliefs as Mary Shelley's parents did. So he was very against marriage, even though he was married. So he kind of thought, one of the quotes that I saw of his was, marriage, it is as if a dead and living body had been linked together in loathsome and horrible communion.
Come on.
Percy Shelley said that. So it seems a little, I mean, this the romanticism movement was all about fucking drama, bitch. That's kind of why do you think the Goths love these dudes so much? Because everything was just so over dramatic. I mean, everything was like the end of the world. So if you read and it's like people talk about nowadays, like people being snowflakes or whatever. It's like, go back to read some Victorian era, some romantic era literature. Holy crap. These dudes were fucking, and it was mostly dudes. They were fucking fainting at the slightest provocation. Holy shit. Everything was the world's biggest deal. It's just hilarious. But yeah, like stuff nowadays that everyone would just let roll off their back. Back then it was a big, huge deal. So yeah.
World was smaller back then.
It was. So everything was just this big dramatic. I think they were just I think it entertained them.
To be outraged.
To be just, everything. They were just having a good time. Because it does kind of give you that serotonin rush, doesn't it? Yeah. To be outraged at something, or everything's the world's biggest deal. It's even though it's really not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things. So I don't know. Honestly, I don't think anybody really knows if Mary Shelley, when they first started their affair, I don't know if she knew that he was already married when they first started, or if he'd had a kid and another one on the way. I don't know if she knew that, or if she cared, or if it bothered her. I'm not really entirely sure. No one really knows. But interestingly, when Mary's dad found out about this, as radical, as progressive, as liberal as his dad was, as her dad was, he's still a dad, right? And he's like, look, my daughter is only 16 and you are 21 and you are already married and have 2 kids. This is not kosher at all. He was really mad. And so basically he said, you cannot see him anymore. Which, like I said, that's a very dad thing to do. Whatever your beliefs are.
Well, he's just watching out for the girl.
That's what I mean.
Dude's a bigamist.
Yeah.
I don't think it was the age.
And that's the thing. And Percy Shelley, look, his poems and shit like that are fantastic. And I'm all into like the atheism and I'm all into that. But he was a little bit of a shit. Not as much of a shit as Lord Byron. Lord Byron was a giant asshole. But, I mean, he was just like a callous shithead.
These dudes kind of had like a rock star syndrome of
They were
of their
also,
era.
they were very, like, they had all these big philosophical ideas, but many of them, let's be honest, were very self-serving. They were very self-serving.
That was the way in. They didn't have
Right.
rock stars yet.
Yeah.
This was the prototype of that. It was that same kind of... They thought they were fucking heavy metal rock stars.
Essentially, they were the rock stars at the time.
Yeah.
And Lord Byron particularly has been called that.
Yeah, no, really? Okay.
Because, and there was a lot of that going on. So, like I said, as much as I like a lot of those dudes' ideas, and like I said, they were very progressive for the time. They were very liberal for the time. They were very anti-religion. They were very into, like, the rights of women and stuff like that. But they also, there was a kind of a darker side of that, which you see, like we've talked about this, you see a lot of cult leaders where in some ways they're just kind of like, oh, everybody should be free to do this and that. And basically what they mean is they should all be free to jump on my dick. And I should be free to be able to do what I want, but y'all can't.
Well, you're saying they're liberal and progressive by today's standards, but actually, no. By today's standards...
by
their
wrote.
standards, they were...
By what they wrote.
Yeah.
For the time.
But by today's standards, they've just been dudes. They've just been pretty regular dudes. There's a lot of guys like that.
Yeah,
now.
so they basically are just kind of like, I don't know.
They're floating on being what we would call normal in a way. They're getting famous just for having common sense. Like, let a woman have a job if she wants it.
Well, that wasn't common sense back then, though.
Back then.
Because everybody's like, what? Women, they can't do anything.
Yeah. So they're getting kind of famous.
They can't think.
Yeah, they're getting kind of famous.
They're not as good.
They're kind of getting famous by just having common sense, but it's going to their heads.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I'm willing to give them some leeway because of the time they grew up in, but that doesn't mean they weren't dicks, because they were.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But you know what I mean? And like I said, a lot of their beliefs were, particularly their beliefs in free love, as in most cult leaders, very self-serving.
Oh, of course, right, yeah. It's free love is about you giving me the pussy. That's what they're fucking saying.
Yeah,
basically.
basically.
Do whatever I want, yeah.
Basically.
Oh, and don't touch her. That's mine.
Yeah.
You know that shit.
Well, like I said, there's a massive double standard. You see that in a lot of, not so much with these guys, because they didn't really seem to care enough.
Yeah. But it was kind of like harem creation and harem sharing.
But yeah, a lot of the shit, and like I said, you see this in a lot of cult leaders too. It's just kind of like, well, free love. Like for me, I want to be able to bang all the chicks I want, but like all these chicks that I'm banging,
you can't have.
You're not allowed to bang any of the other dudes,
and
even if you want to.
Stop fucking your wife. That belongs to me.
Right. So like I said, it's very, very double standard. It always has been.
Shit,
it always has been.
That was some weird shit, man.
Dudes have this weird, like, not all dudes, obviously, but it's like a dude mentality to be like, well, I can do whatever I want, but you can't. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. So I kind of feel like there was an aspect of that. So, like I said, I can't, William Godwin, like I said, that's Mary Shelley's dad. Yes, he was very ahead of his time. Yes, he was very into free love, but that was still his daughter, and she was still 16. And her boyfriend was still married, so he was just kind of like, yeah, I don't like this. Y'all can't see each other. At this point, Percy Shelley, being a drama queen, proposes, I believe, a suicide pact. So he's going to give Mary some poison, and then he's going to shoot himself. Mary's like, yeah, no, I don't really, I love you, but I'm not going to do that. Okay. And he's just like, okay, well, you talked me out of it. But then he goes home later and drinks like a whole shit ton of laudanum, which also didn't kill him. So that's 2 suicide attempts already. Like I said, drama queen. Big time. So he decided after the 2 suicide attempts failed, well, I have to be with Mary or my life is over. So we're going to do some shit. Now, so what they decided to do was they were going to run away together and essentially elope. They didn't marry until later. I think that's kind of like a misnomer because when people talk about the summer of 1816 and they still call her Mary Shelley, they weren't married at that time. They didn't marry until later on. So they decided to run away together. So in the middle of the night, this is like some fucked up shit. So Mary like sneaks out of the house. And Percy is like in a coach or whatever, and he's like waiting for her. Now, this was a big deal because Mary Shelley, her and her dad, I mean, she loved her dad. She worshipped her dad. And normally, if she hadn't been so, what do you want to call it? Like dick smacked. If she hadn't been so in love with Percy Shelley, she probably wouldn't have done this shit. Although I do kind of feel like she thought that maybe her dad would understand or that he would forgive her, but that's not really what happened. Which we'll get into in a little bit, but so she essentially ran off with Percy Shelley. She snuck out in the middle of the night and ran off with him. Now, interestingly, she brought a third wheel along with her. This third wheel was Claire Clairmont. Now, Claire Clairmont was her stepsister because after Mary Shelley's mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, had died, 4 years later, William Godwin had remarried. Now, Mary's stepmother and Mary never got along because I think that the stepmother like had some kids of her own, including Claire, and I kind of feel like Mary thought that the stepmother like favored her own kids. Obviously, well, I mean that happens a lot. So her and Mary had a very contentious relationship, and indeed, Mary and her stepsister Claire Clairmont also seem to have had like a little bit of a contentious relation. They were like frenemies. I don't know. That's kind of what I get from reading about them. Another thing too was that Claire, at least when they first all ran off together, she was all trying to jump on Percy Shelley's dick also, which Mary was not having. So they were almost like, for the long time that the three of them like hung out together, there was a lot of like infighting and like jealousy between the two of them. So there's like a lot of sexual tension going on. And like I said, Percy Shelley being all into like free love, being I can bang whoever I want to and you can't say boo about it. So he's like trying to get into Claire's pants as well. Mary's not loving that. So, so there's a lot of like shit going on between the two stepsisters. So that probably wasn't fun either. Because one of Percy Shelley's ideas, like I said, was one of his dreams. He's going to set up a commune, because of course he was. Yeah. With a harem. Essentially, he wanted a harem.
He wanted to be a cult leader.
Yeah, that's kind of like that's why I made that comparison. Yeah. Because it really does seem like, it sounds cool. Like you're advocating for like, yeah, women can sleep with whoever they want. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome.
That's the center and all that shit.
But as long as they all sleep with me, you can't sleep with other dudes. I'm gonna have it like you can sleep with who you want as long as it's me.
Yeah, and
I kind of feel like
in this age, I don't think any of the Mormon cults had started yet. So he's coming up with this kind of out of the blue.
Yeah, I mean, it was like I said, it was kind of in like certain circles at that time. It wasn't like unheard of. Yeah, but it was still very fringe.
I'm trying to think of fucking where he's getting this inspiration. Is this just coming up out of nowhere, or is he inventing this all his own? Maybe it's just like a natural thing. Well, I'm popular and there's all these women. I have to have a justification for me getting balls deep into all these women. And it's got to be somewhere outside of society where I control it. Like my own little paradise.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
where he's going.
I'm sure that's exactly what the thought process was. Whether it was that cut and dried or whether he was that aware of it.
This? Well, God's involved in it or this and that or it's our new world that we're making. And, yeah, okay. I think I see where it's coming from.
Yeah.
So it's not as a revolutionary idea as you would actually think. It's not. It's a natural process.
And like I said,
it's been going on in the Middle East and other countries and in Rome forever. So
well, yeah, and like I said, that's why like from our point of view, like all this advocation of like free love, it sounds very like, yeah, that's cool. But in practice, I kind of feel like the dudes that were advocating for it were only advocating for it as long as all the women slept with them.
Well, of course.
That was kind of like the caveat of that. Because it's like, well, we don't want women to be free to bang other dudes.
Yeah, would you make a paradise where the women are banging some other dudes?
Yes,
no,
no, they often bang me.
No, exactly.
That's how that's going to work out. Yeah.
Yeah, because the fantasy falls apart.
Yeah.
When it's all these chicks banging some other dude. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, that wasn't how I envisioned this going.
What happened? No.
When I gave women the right to like sleep with whoever they wanted,
wait a minute.
I just assumed they would all jump on my dick. I didn't think they'd be jumping on these other motherfuckers' dicks. I don't like that at all. Let's
we gotta cut this shit off. We gotta cut this shit off.
That's exactly.
I decree a new law.
Yeah.
Okay. You can't fuck anybody unless you're married.
And then they go back to.
It goes back to the way it was because that's how that shit. That's how that cycle fucking started.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I have no doubt at all about that because that's kind of. It seems like all the dudes, well, at least all the ones that we know about nowadays that advocated for free love, absolutely, I kind of feel like that was sort of their attitude.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to say with like Percy Shelley and Lord Byron because they both died so young, but I kind of feel like if they'd gotten older, they would have got like way more conservative suddenly. And it's like suddenly, oh, women can't do shit anymore because y'all aren't jumping on my dick anymore now that I'm old. I kind of feel like it would have gone in that direction. So Mary, even though she's only 16 at the time, I mean, she's pretty fucking intelligent. She had to know that this was going to be... I don't think she expected her dad to have as drastic a reaction as he did. But this is like... They were kind of wealthy, her family. At least, and they were kind of like respected in certain circles. So she did have like a rep to protect, I guess, if you want to say it that way. So she was kind of like ruining her reputation in a way, and maybe risking alienating herself from her family. Although I don't know if she realized the extent of what that would happen when she actually did it because she was so, just dick struck, I guess, with Percy Shelley. They were like so in love or whatever. So they run off together with Claire Claremont in tow.
Jenny said dick struck.
I did.
Jenny said dick struck. Okay.
I mean, she's 16.
Right, yeah.
What are you going to do?
Easily affected.
Yeah, what?
Easily affected.
I thought you said penisly affected.
No, easily affected. Everything's impressive at 16.
That's what I mean. Everything's like a big, giant deal. And, so you can kind of like forgive them a little bit. Teenagers do dumb shit, whether it's now or whether it's like or whether it's 1800, whatever. So they run off together and then they go on this like big adventure type of thing, sort of like they go they get a boat and they go across the English Channel. There's this big huge storm, they're almost killed. It's like this fucking it's this whole thing. So they end up they go to Switzerland, like to this resort, and then they go along the Rhine River. Now apparently I've seen this from some sources, but while they're traveling at this stage, Mary first heard about a story named this dude who I guess he was a real guy, but he was like an anatomist, and his name was Conrad Dippel. And he was, like I said, he was an anatomist, and he was also kind of like into the occult and shit like that. And one thing that he would do, allegedly, was that he would steal dead bodies at a graveyards, and he had this like serum or something like that he had apparently invented. And injected it into the dead bodies and brought them back to life. So this is kind of like a story that she heard after she had run away with Percy. And this story of this person, really fascinated her. Now, the place where he was born, was this place called Rock of the Franks, which in German is Burg Frankenstein. So they think that maybe that's where she got the kernel of the idea first kind of like going around in her mind when she was 16 years old. Because as I said, she had grown up in an era where galvanism was kind of a big thing. People were like shocking dead bodies and saying, "Woo, we brought him back to life." So this was kind of like a big, like the nature of life was kind of like on the forefront of scientific thought at the time. And that was something that seemed to like fascinate her. You know what I mean? So, like I said, I talked about Galvani before, Luigi Galvani, like bringing the fucking frogs to life, or that's what everybody thought. But so, that was kind of like a big thing that was going on at the time. Now, so basically, like I said, and she was also fascinated by grave robbers, because as we mentioned earlier, for a long time and during this period, you weren't allowed, even if you were in medical school, this is so fucked up. If you were in medical school, you weren't allowed to dissect corpses, right? Because it was considered, I guess, like sacrilegious, or you were blaspheming the dead or whatever. So there was kind of like a huge underground trade in corpses that people would dig up and they'd sell to medical schools.
You
like
could
I said,
get rich back in the day.
You could.
In the day off doing that shit.
Like I said, Burke
that was
and
the
Hare.
crack of the day. Just sell some dead bodies.
Burke and Hare probably the most famous, but because they started killing people, and I'm sure some other ones did as well. I'm sure it was probably actually pretty commonplace. But there was a very bustling like black market in corpses, because obviously you're in medical school, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be cutting into living people. Probably it's a good idea to like cut up some cadavers and like see what the fuck's going on in there, instead of just like some fucking drawings from, ancient Greeks, which might or might not be entirely anatomically accurate. So, so there was a demand. So obviously a black market supply had risen up to meet that demand. And that was another thing that Mary was fascinated by, was like kind of grave robbing, or all that kind of, cadaver shit that was going on back then. So basically, all right. So Mary, they kind of went on the run for a while. And then in 1814, she comes back to London with Percy, and she is pregnant. She got a bun in the oven. She's tubbed, as they say in the UK.
Oh, man.
Now, she comes back to her dad's house fully expecting him to be cool with it. But, well, like I said, her and her dad were, like, quite close. And because he was such an advocate of, like, free love, he was very into, like, so she thought that he would understand. He did not. William Godwin basically was like, no, get the fuck out of my sight. This is not cool. They did reconcile later, spoiler alert, but for a time period, basically he was so mad that he's like, I don't even want to look at you right now because you ran off with a married man after I told you not to, and got yourself pregnant, and I am just like not having it right now. I thought I raised you better. It was this whole thing. Now, so at this point, Mary is only 17 years old, and she's pregnant. She gives birth to the baby 2 months prematurely, and the baby died.
Damn.
Now, after this, she had horrible recurring nightmares about this dead baby, which sadly, and again, spoiler alert, this is not the first dead baby. There was a lot of her babies dead. I'm just saying. It's fucked up. So she's very young. She's only 17, and she has a dead baby, and she keeps having like nightmares about it. Which might have been why she was so fascinated by stories about people trying to bring the dead back to life. Maybe, I'm just speculating. But she was really fucked up by her baby dying, which understandably. So now it's kind of like at this point, because Mary's baby has died, and again, understandably, she's not happy. She's depressed. She's not going to be real fun to be around. And you would think, well, I wouldn't think this, but you would think that Percy, her boyfriend, would be supportive. Oh, it's terrible. Our baby died. It's worse. And you would think that he would like try to support her through this difficult time, but not so much. It does really seem like Percy was kind of more like, well, I'm going to go hang out with Claire because she's a little bit younger. She's not a bummer all the time because her baby died. That's not. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know if he actually said any of these things, but his attitudes at the time do kind of suggest this. So he's basically like hanging out with Claire more because I guess she was more fun, and like I said, she was younger, and she didn't have this crushing grief that Mary was going through that Percy really didn't seem all that willing to deal with. He was pretty young too, gotta say. Now, Percy Shelley, He was actually from a wealthy family. I believe his dad was a baronet. But because he had run off, he had abandoned his wife and kids and had run off with a 16-year-old girl, which back then, like I said, probably a little more acceptable, but still not all that acceptable. So his wealthy family were like, okay, Percy, you were cut off. So he was really not, like, every now and then, if he really begged, like, his dad would give him, like, some money, but he wasn't getting, I guess he was getting, like, a yearly stipend before, and he wasn't getting that anymore because they did not approve of the shit that he was up to. So during this time period, not only was Mary grieving her, her first child being dead, and also possibly losing her lover's attentions to another woman, also then they had to deal with a bunch of fucking poverty because now suddenly, Percy's family had cut him off and they didn't have, like, a lot of money to live on anymore. Now, I'm going to have to go to the bathroom. Yeah. You got drinks and stuff like that? Yeah. You just carry it.
You can use mine if you need to. Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to go in here. Well, hi, Pookie. Right. She's still in the sink.
All right.
Talk about something.
I am talking. She tells me to talk about something. Talk about let's see what the comments say. All right. Mego says he has to check out because he's got an early showing of Dune tomorrow. Take care of all. Yeah. Khan of Aslan over in Mexico got a HD copy, a bootleg copy of Dune, and he said it was great. He liked it. His wife didn't like it as much. His wife thought it was more of kind of like a man's movie, you know what I mean? So I'm like, okay, then it's gonna be all mine. I fucking love the original, the David Lynch version, and all the games. But the Dune Emperor, I have a PC that only has one purpose, and that's to play Dune Emperor. If you guys know that game, I fucking love it. The music and everything. I'll go in there and lift to the Harkonnen soundtrack. It had a great music. It's the late '90s. It's kind of like a predecessor of fucking what's the name? Like Red Alert, I think is the name of the of that series. I fucking loved it. Anyway, she's back.
What are you talking about?
Talking about Dune.
Oh, okay.
Con
we
got.
gotta see that.
Yeah, Con got a HD bootleg copy of it. Watched it at home. He liked it. His wife didn't like it as much though.
I'm excited.
Yeah, he said it's good. And of course, it's not the whole movie. It's going to be a trilogy, which that's great. That's the only way you're going to be able to fucking talk about Dune. And we liked that director. So
like I said, he did Blade Runner 2049.
And we got to see. Maybe tomorrow we'll see Halloween.
Yeah, I kind of want to, because like I said, we were trying to go see it earlier in the week, but there weren't any early shows, and I just didn't have time to go. So maybe we'll go tomorrow because we're not streaming tomorrow.
Jenny's trimming back down. Those fucking titties are looking fucking grabby. I'm gonna grab one of them bitches. And then her legs. Jenny been working those legs out. They're looking good.
Yeah, I got my bike.
Jenny's making a comeback. I'm gonna get you on that leg extension machine, that other one too. That'll accelerate it even more. Jenny making a comeback.
We're coming back from where? Where was I?
I don't know where you were. You went somewhere for a few months.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't go anywhere. I'm right here.
All right. Well, we both put on some weight.
Well, we did, yeah, but that's because your food is so good.
Yeah, and we had to fucking go into that shit, so. And
you need to stop making such delicious, fattening food.
Well, I did.
You did, I know.
I did. And during this move, I fucking trimmed down quite a bit.
Well, because we were busy and we weren't eating and we were just like working all day because we were just like carrying shit up and downstairs, up and downstairs, up and downstairs, like all day. And we weren't really stopping to eat. We would go an entire day.
I wouldn't even get hungry. I wouldn't even get hungry.
Yeah, we weren't thinking about it. We'd go an entire day and like not eat anything and be like, oh yeah, we forgot to eat because we were so fucking busy.
Yeah.
But I forget to eat sometimes too when I'm like.
I just kept injecting testosterone and taking Anavar. Just get fucking more and more power. The more tired I get, the stronger I'd get. That's some weird shit.
Yeah. So while you were gone, I was talking about because Mary Shelley's first baby had died, and Percy was just kind of like, okay, well, you're a bummer to be around now because you're grieving, so I'm going to go hang out with Claire. So obviously that didn't really help Mary's mental state any. And also, Percy Shelley's parents, who were kind of like nobility, they cut him off because he was married. He abandoned his wife and kids and had run off with a 16-year-old girl, and they were not happy about it. So they were basically like, well, you're not getting your fucking allowance anymore. Bye, bitch. So there was also some poverty they had to deal with. So again, a kind of a shitty situation. So basically, less than a year later, Mary was pregnant again. And she actually had a son named William. He was born when she was 18 years old, and she adored this kid. Now, at this point, like I said, Percy was he's kind of trying to split the difference between Mary and Claire at this point. No one's entirely sure if he was fucking Claire at this point. I'm pretty sure he probably was.
Probably fucked every woman that he was around.
I imagine he did, yeah.
Dealing with rock star type fucking mentality.
Yeah, he couldn't keep it in his pants, no. I am pretty sure.
Probably had a lot of women who were trying to get some of that just to get the name.
Yeah.
Just to see what it was all about.
I mean, he wasn't super famous at this time. It's ironic because I kind of feel like for a time, Mary Shelley was a little bit overshadowed by Percy. But Percy Shelley, arguably, would not be remembered as much as he was if it wasn't for Mary pushing to have his poems like published and shit like that after he died. Because he died real young. So he was known at the time, but he wasn't like famous.
Right.
He wasn't as famous as Lord Byron. I think he was more famous because he was like associated with Lord Byron.
Shit, man, your name is fucking. Your name has the title Lord on the front of it.
Yeah.
Back in the day when that was some shit, you know what I mean?
Well, his actual name was George Gordon.
Yeah, but
Lord Byron.
Yeah, Lord Byron. That's
George Gordon, Lord
that's
Byron.
That's some famous
that
shit right there.
And he was more infamous than famous.
That's some fancy shit.
Because he was such a
hoe.
Yeah.
He's a hoe. Yeah.
Well, not only a hoe, but he was like he was the worst kind of hoe. He's just like, I'm just going to impregnate all these women and then be like, yeah, fuck your kids.
Yeah, right.
I'm not supporting.
That's your problem.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. He did not care at all. He did not care at all.
Shouldn't have got pregnant.
And Percy had a little bit of that going on, too. Not as bad as Lord Byron, I will say. At least Percy did seem to care a little bit. But Lord Byron absolutely did not care. He really did not. He just, put his dick everywhere and, just let the chips fall where they may. He really did not give a shit. So, yeah, he was kind of a terrible person. But, so there was that whole thing. So at this point, Mary's had another kid, William, so that's kind of cheered her up some because, William was apparently a delightful little boy. Claire, like I said, probably fucking Percy at this time too. No one's entirely sure, but I'm imagining probably they were. Now, 1815 though, Claire took off, and they were all living in one room, essentially like a studio apartment type situation. So she fucked off and went to Devon, and she was also pregnant at this time too, and she gave birth to a baby. Was it Percy's? Probably. No one can prove that, but it was kind of common back in those days for a pregnant woman who was not married to kind of disappear for a time and go oh, I was convalescing, I had a disease or something, because it was the shame of having birth out of wedlock. So you have
special facilities for this.
Yeah, so you had to disappear for a while and then come back and be oh, hi, I'm back. It's oh, I was so sick for but everybody kind of knew what the deal was.
Yeah, and the baby, I guess, got sold out to adoption or something.
Yeah, they put them in orphanages or sent them to a convent or some shit like that. It's fucking, yeah. So they think that Claire disappeared for a time and gave birth to a baby, possibly Percy's, allegedly. Nobody knows, but probably. But then she comes back nothing happened, right? Now at this point she comes back and she's well, Percy Shelley is fine and all, but I got my eyes on some bigger game. I'm gonna go after Lord Byron, right? Although I kind of feel bigger game, yeah, because he was more famous and stuff, but was it easy to get Lord Byron to fuck you? And absolutely it was easy to get Lord Byron to fuck you. All you'd have to do is just come up to the dude and be hey, I'm a woman, and he'd be all right, I'm fucking that shit. So it's it's not a big achievement to get Lord Byron to fuck you. He'd fuck everybody. That was kind of his thing. So if you were a good looking woman, he was gonna get in that. But I said, he wasn't going to give a shit about you, or if you got pregnant, he wasn't.
You like a roller coaster.
Yeah, and then he was okay,
you did it.
He must be this tall to ride. And yeah, but after that, he'd be okay, bye. And that would kind of be the end of it. So, I don't know why you.
Men like that throughout history. Been a lot of men like that.
They
exist right now like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's easy for them. They don't really have to bear the brunt of.
Of course not.
I mean, they don't have to like get fat for 9 months and have a kid that's gonna like fucking be.
The average dude is like that.
Well, I know they are.
Yeah.
I know they are. Why do you think I'm so cynical about the whole thing? You know who I am. Well, that's why. It's because they don't have to really suffer a lot of consequences in the same way that a woman does. You know what I'm saying? And you can see that, I mean, particularly in this time period. It's probably better nowadays, but back then, I don't really think anybody expected, I mean, nobody expected men to be involved in any kind of child care or anything like that. You fathered children left and right, and they're just be like, oh, well, not my problem.
Yeah, well, this shit been going on for centuries. Like
That's what I mean,
too.
not my problem. I'm really not.
Knocking down all the peasant women, and they're having kids. Like, I got nothing to do with it. I got nothing to do with that shit.
Not my problem. Like, it wasn't their problem. It wasn't their problem.
She should have kept her legs closed.
Yeah, it's like, well,
she knew what was gonna happen.
He let me have, she let me have sex with her, so she must have been okay with like how that was gonna work out. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Fucking funny.
So yeah. Now Lord Byron, as I said at this time, even in this time, he's pretty, he had very rock star kind of reputation. Depending on who was talking about him. Like, some people thought he was awesome, but, like, most people just kind of thought he was, like, a fucking debauched piece of shit. You know what I mean? He was kind of like... He was basically one of those dudes that he just lived by his creed, I guess. He just, like, did whatever the fuck he wanted. One of the most famous quotes about him, the description of mad, bad, and dangerous to know. That's what they called him. Because, like I said, you couldn't have boobs or a vagina around the dude. He would, like, knock it down, and then, like, he'd knock you up and then just be like, bye, and just move on to the next one. Also, maybe, allegedly, probably he had sex with his half-sister. So,
Well, that's not, I don't think that was
that's
all
a little weird, but okay.
Yeah, I don't think that was really a big deal back then. I mean, fucking Mary Shelley fucking wrote some shit about her dad. She didn't really know her dad that well, and she was just saying that she was just real interested in that dude whenever he was around. She called him that man a lot.
She was actually really close to her dad.
Yeah.
Like I said, they had a big rift after she ran off with Percy, but they reconciled later.
I don't know how old she was when she was writing that. I think she was 15 or 16 when she was calling him that man. And
well, she was 16 when she ran off with Percy.
Okay, so it might have been a little bit.
And then for
that.
many years, her dad wouldn't speak to her because of that.
Okay.
They reconciled later when she married Percy.
Yeah.
Like in 1816.
I was.
So for a couple years, they were like.
I saw the quotes reading about her in a textbook one time. It had to do with fucking literature, English lit, and or American literature, one of the two. I don't remember which one it was.
Well, it'd be English, wouldn't it?
Yeah, English lit. Yeah, and no, it was kind of inferred that there might have been something going on there between her and her dad, at least on her side, that she was in love with him.
Although, isn't that weird, though? Because I kind of feel like... Well, I don't know. I don't know how common it is, but I think... I don't know. There's kind of a thing for, like, young girls to be, like, idolize their dad in some ways. I didn't do that, but...
He was gone. She was saying that he was gone all the time, and when he would show up, she was just talking about that man, that mysterious man, and fucking just going on. Somebody could probably dig up the quotes. It just kind of sounded suspicious. But,
But the thing about it, though, is that we're seeing things through a modern lens.
Yeah,
and it's like maybe... Because the thing about it, and I don't know why I just thought of this, but in the Victorian era particularly, the way that men would write to their close friends, to us, it sounds like...
Yeah. Yeah.
But it wasn't, like, not back in the day, not really.
Yeah.
But they were just a lot more, they were just, like, different in the way they expressed their emotions toward one another. Like, I feel like...
It was real flowery language.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So it might have been a case of that, where just we're seeing things through modern sensibilities, and it's like, whoa, that sounds, like, really weird. But back then it wouldn't have been weird. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't read that, so I'm not really sure.
She refers to him as that man.
But that's not... I mean, that really doesn't suggest anything to me.
I just thought it was weird. And then she was just curious and this and that and fucking how he was gone and now he's back and fucking... it's been a long time.
Well, and you have to think, too, that her mother died when she was a baby.
Right.
So she had been raised by her dad and presumably, like, servants or nannies or whatever. Because I don't think, like, a man would raise a baby back then.
Yeah.
But, not somebody of his status. But, so maybe she just thought of him as this kind of, like,
dude
maybe she
didn't really know.
idolized him.
Yeah.
Because he was, his followers and stuff like that,
Yeah.
like, he had, like, acolytes and whatever, and they actually did, like, idolize him at the time, so maybe that's how she thought of him. She thought of him as maybe, like, this godlike sort of figure. Because, like I said, I kind of feel like they had been really close during her childhood because they shared a lot of the same attitudes and their personality was very similar, which I think was why, when she ran off with Percy Shelley, why she was so surprised when she came back to London and her dad would not speak to her. I think that was very upsetting for her because she expected that her dad would understand. Okay. And she was very, very shocked that he did not. Because basically she was like, well, that's kind of like your whole thing, right? It's like free love and like, we're allowed to do whatever we want. It's like we're following our heart. It's individualist, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of feel like, in her 16-year-old mind, she's like, well, I'm doing exactly what you always advocated, so why are you shitting on me? So I kind of, I'm putting words in her mouth, obviously, but I kind of feel like that was the attitude she was coming at it with, and so she didn't really get why he was so mad at her. You know what I mean? Okay. I think she thought that he would understand, and he didn't. But like I said, he's still a dad, and that's still his daughter.
People aren't saying much. Bee's Nest said that the FBI believes that they found Brian Laundrie's remains. He offed himself. I don't know who that is.
Oh, yeah, somebody was asking me about
some
that.
Kind of game,
like,
some kind of...
Yeah, like a disappearance.
Kind of case,
yeah, somebody asked me about it because I said, we should do a show about that one of these days. But yeah, so we're talking about Lord Byron. So...
If y'all want to send us some of them flash bulbs, now would be a good time to get some of them super chats. Where they at, babe? Jenny's here working her heart out.
Well, I love this all this kind of shit. I love this literary shit.
Yeah.
Like, I know, like, Tom makes fun of me for overthinking things and being interested in these kind of, like, high-minded, that's what he calls me all the time.
I call that shit high-minded stuff.
I know he makes fun of me for being into that, but it's like, I'm into that, and it's like, sorry. I'm sorry, not sorry. No, I'm not sorry.
She's not sorry.
No. I just,
just different tastes, that's all.
I'm just, like, I'm really into this. I was like, I love this kind of shit.